Chapter 52. Capel Sid agreed, and the two sides began to discuss the acquisition plan. In Eric's opinion, the most valuable person in Sid's agency was Capel Sid himself. Although Capel wasn't one of the founding five of CAA, his ability wasn't much worse than theirs. The remaining 7 or 8 agents and 20 or so actors in the agency were basically worthless, at least not before Eric acquired them. It wasn't that Sid's agency didn't have top-notch actors, but because of Michael Ovitz, a few well-known actors had no choice but to leave after a period of time. In the end, those who stayed were simply unable to find a better way out. After all, Capel was still very capable. Although it was difficult for his actors to make a name for themselves under CAA's shadow, they were still able to get roles in independent movies or TV series. Eric, $1 million is very difficult for me to accept. Capel was somewhat dissatisfied with Eric's offer. When he was at CAA, his annual salary was more than $1 million. Eric said unhurriedly, "Capel, the only valuable things in your agency are the contracts of those 20 or so actors. They don't mean much to me. If I want, I can find a few hundred actors of that level at any time." Capel retorted, "Eric, they're all outstanding actors. After being an agent for so many years, my judgment definitely isn't bad. They just lack opportunities. All the actors struggling at the bottom of Hollywood just lack opportunities. Capel, that $1 million is all for me, and I've also left you with 10% of the shares. I believe that in a few years, you'll definitely realize that you've gained a great deal. As for them, what I can give them is the opportunity they've been dreaming of." Capel knew that Eric was telling the truth, so he sighed and nodded slightly. Since they had already reached an agreement, the two sides quickly signed the contract. The agency had changed owners, so the name had to be changed. Eric unscrupulously used the name United Elite Agency, and abbreviated it to UTA. It was one of the top 5 agencies in Hollywood alongside CAA, WMA, and other giants in his previous life. However, UTA was only established in 1991. By the time he was done, it was already noon. After lunch, Eric followed Capel Sid to the Sid agency's office in Burbank. Capel Sid had only rented a few offices here, which made him look very shabby. However, at this time, the office was crowded with people. They also knew that today was a special day for the brokerage company. When Eric saw the expectant faces of these agents and actors, he suddenly thought of a question. He simply nodded to everyone and pulled Jeffrey and Kapoor into a separate office. He asked, "Kapoor, how much is your management company's commission right now?" 6%. So little? Eric was a little surprised. "Isn't it 10%? Jeffrey interrupted. "Eric, that was a long time ago." Kapoor also explained, "Ever since CAA broke this rule for the sake of competition, the agency's shares have been getting lower and lower. Especially for small brokerage companies like us, it's impossible for us to take 10%. Right now, only CAA and WMA have the confidence to take a 10% commission. After the rise of CAA, apart from the lower commission for the big stars, they've restored the 10% commission for the second and third-rate stars." Eric thought for a moment and said, "Change the agreement and increase the commission to 10%. "Eric, isn't that a bit inappropriate?" Before Kapoor could answer, Jeffrey couldn't help but object. Eric explained, "If we don't change it now, when the brokerage company develops, increasing the commission will have a bigger impact. So, which one of you will announce it?" Jeffrey and Kapoor glanced at each other before turning to look at Eric at the same time. Okay, I'll be the bad guy. I don't need to introduce myself. Everyone must know who I am. Now, I officially announce that I am the new owner of this brokerage company. The company's name is UTA. My next movie will start filming after the new year. As long as your image is suitable and you pass the audition, you will be given priority to get the role in the movie. Everyone knows about Home Alone. People like Stuart Runkle and Matthew Perry, who were originally unknown, have now become popular stars. Some other supporting actors who could only act in TV dramas have also successfully entered the big screen because of their roles in Home Alone. Seeing the undisguised joy on everyone's faces, Eric knew that he had laid the groundwork. He changed the topic and said, "However, I'm a capitalist, not a philanthropist. I'm giving you opportunities that are hard to get in the past, and at the same time, I need to receive something in return. Therefore, the original contract of the company's actors will need to be revised and the commission will be increased to 10%. If anyone finds it unacceptable, they can choose to terminate the contract and leave." After Eric finished speaking, he turned around and returned to the office to give everyone some time to consider. He believed that as long as these people had a normal IQ, they wouldn't choose to leave at this time. In the office, Jeffrey and Kapoor were already discussing the preparations for Pretty Woman. "Eric, Jeffrey said that you want to invite Sophie Marceau to be the female lead?" Kapoor asked. Eric nodded. "Yes. Is there a problem?" Kapoor said, "If you want to start filming after the new year, I advise you to change the actress. Because I was originally going to Europe to develop, I've been paying attention to the news over there during this period. Sophie Marceau is currently filming Andrei Zolaski's new film. With Andrei's filming progress, even if your Pretty Woman is released, he might not be able to finish filming." Eric recalled. According to the time, Sophie was probably filming My Night is More Beautiful Than Your Day, which some people jokingly called an alien movie. The name was very beautiful, but the content was a little confusing. However, it was indeed Zolaski's usual style. "Then let's use Julia Roberts. Kapoor, I hope that you can personally be Julia's manager." Jeffrey persuaded again. "Eric, you should know that your movie can't fail. Now, many people are waiting to see you make a fool of yourself, so it's better." "Jeffrey, I know what you mean, but," Eric smiled and said, "didn't you read the newspapers? With the fame accumulated from my previous 2 movies, even if the new movie turns out to be a pile of shit, I can still make money. So, as long as the movie's quality is good, it will be difficult for it to fail. Then, why don't we take this opportunity to groom an actress of our own? What if Julia Roberts doesn't act well?" Eric's smile was strangely ambiguous. "Don't worry, I will personally teach her." As Eric expected, none of the actors from the agency chose to leave. They all accepted the new contract proposal proposed by Eric. After dealing with these matters, Eric was about to drive home. Jeffrey walked up and sat in the front passenger seat. "Eric, my car has been sent for maintenance. Can you give me a ride?" "No problem." On the road, Jeffrey asked with concern, "Eric, you and Drew, what's going on? I saw in the newspapers today that she went to look for you again yesterday. It seems that her mother, Edith, also went to your house?" Eric did not hide anything from Jeffrey and told him in detail what happened yesterday. "This is good. Drew is a talented actress. But, are you going to let her stay at your house forever? You are not related to her by blood. If this continues, coupled with the media's hype, even if Drew's mother doesn't find trouble with you, the Child Protection Association will step in. After all, Drew is only 13 years old." "Don't worry, I know this. I have already decided to send Drew to boarding school." "That's good." Jeffrey nodded. "Eric, you don't really have a Lolita complex, do you?" The car that was moving steadily suddenly slowed down. The Chevrolet behind them was already close. When Eric stopped, the other party almost rear-ended him. Ignoring the cars on the road, the fat white man in the Chevrolet stuck his head out of the car window and started cursing. Eric calmed himself down and steered the steering wheel away from the Chevrolet behind. "Jeffrey, other than her age, which part of Drew resembles Lolita?" She was obviously a demon, a little fox that had cultivated for at least 500 years. "Anyway, you have to know your limits." Jeffrey seemed to have confirmed Eric's Lolita tendencies. Chapter 53. Ever since the news of Drew spending the night at Eric's house broke out, the sales of many newspapers hyping this matter increased greatly. Therefore, during this period of time, the number of paparazzi around Eric didn't decrease. The day after the acquisition of the agency, the news quickly appeared in the newspapers. The Los Angeles Metropolitan News directly analyzed the matter. "It's hard to understand why Eric Williams chose to acquire Capel Sid's agency. Although Capel Sid is an outstanding agent, he was kicked out of CAA because of his conflict with Michael Ovitz. It's difficult for him to move forward in the Hollywood agent circle. It's rumored that Capel Sid planned to sell the agency and go to Europe, but Eric Williams insisted that he stay. It seems that our young miracle director has been blinded by success. He doesn't know the serious consequences of angering a behemoth like CAA. The Hollywood Reporter, on the other hand, focused on the fact that Eric had increased his agency's commission. According to a contracted actor who changed his name to United Elite Agency, the first thing Eric Williams announced after taking over the company was to increase the agency's commission to the maximum value of 10% set by federal law. In the future, Eric Williams would definitely choose actors from his own agency first. If his works could maintain the level of Back to 17 or Home Alone, even if the commission was increased to 20%, it would be enough to make many actors eager to be famous scramble for it. But obviously, this assumption was impossible. Movies were like gambling, and no director could win all the time. Therefore, the author is sure that Eric Williams' new agency won't be able to survive a year. Other newspapers were also pessimistic about Eric's acquisition. Some reporters even sent an interview invitation to Michael Ovitz in order to make this matter as popular as possible. Michael Ovitz didn't refuse like before. Although he didn't appear personally, he asked his assistant to make a statement on his behalf. The general idea was that he was optimistic about the potential of the young director Eric Williams and hoped that there was a possibility of cooperation between the two sides. This statement seemed normal, but the media gave a completely opposite interpretation. This was a subtle warning from the head of CAA to Eric Williams. As long as he was still involved with Capel Sid, there was no possibility of cooperation between the two sides. Of course, this was only the speculation of some media. Then, Eric's second film, Pretty Woman, was announced through the media. The powerful paparazzi didn't take long to dig out the news that Eric was trying to invite Richard Gere to play the male lead. This made many paparazzi excited because Richard Gere was one of the artists signed by CAA and was at a low point in his career. Under normal circumstances, he would 100% accept Eric's invitation. Therefore, if Richard Gere and Eric didn't cooperate, the speculation that CAA was going to ban Eric would be confirmed. Inside a newly renovated conference room of Firefly Film, Horner Willie was leisurely drinking coffee. He was one of CAA's top agents, and he also had another identity, Richard Gere's agent. This was why he was here today. The door of the conference room was pushed open, and Eric walked in. He smiled and extended his hand to Horner Willie. "I'm sorry to have kept you waiting, Mr. Willie." "It's okay." Horner Willie stood up proudly and shook Eric's hand. He then quickly sat down. Eric frowned and sat down across from Horner Willie. He looked around the conference room and asked, "Mr. Willie, please ask why Mr. Richard Gere isn't here today. He's the main character of today's meeting, right?" Horner Willie shook his head and said, "Richard is busy with other things. He has given me full authority to handle this matter." Even though Eric had a hunch, he still asked politely, "Mr. Richard Gere should have read the script outline I sent him, right? What do you think?" Horner Willie said, "Mr. Williams, Richard is very satisfied with your script. It's just that the salary you offered is only $500,000. It's hard for him to accept. Richard's an officer and a gentleman, earned more than $100 million in North American box office." Eric sneered in his heart. "Another guy who thinks he's a newbie." He said, "Mr. Willie, I'm young, so I've never heard of an officer and a gentleman. May I ask when the movie was shot? I'll go back and look at the videotape." 1982, Horner Willie blurted out. When he saw Eric's mocking expression, Horner Willie realized that he had been fooled. The salary of a Hollywood movie star wasn't at its peak. The higher the box office, the higher the value of the star. Instead, it was calculated based on factors such as the box office, awards, and personal exposure of the films they had acted in recent years. An Officer and a Gentleman was Richard Gere's movie from 7 years ago. It basically didn't have any value as a reference for his current value. Before sending out the invitation, Eric had done a full understanding of Richard Gere's recent career situation. Richard Gere's movies in the past 3 years had all failed at the box office. His best action thriller, Merciless, only grossed $12 million at the box office. The most recent movie he acted in only earned $180,000 in box office. That's right, it was $180,000. The producer probably didn't even earn back the cost of the cameo. Therefore, Eric's offer of $500,000 was a bit high. Okay, Mr. Horner, since you think it's too little, then tell me your conditions. Horner Willie's expression quickly returned to normal. He said, Mr. Williams, actually, we can accept $500,000. However, you should know what your problem is. Mr. Ovitz isn't a stingy person. As long as Capel Sid leaves America, Mr. Ovitz won't target him anymore. Originally, this matter was already settled, but you acted on your own initiative and kept him here. This made Mr. Ovitz very embarrassed, so... Eric sneered and said, So you used our cooperation to threaten me and make me fire Capel, right? How laughable. You forced someone to leave his own country and still shamelessly say that you're magnanimous. Mr. Williams. Horner Willie's expression also turned cold. Although you have some achievements, don't think too highly of yourself. In front of the huge CAA, you're just an ant. I hope you're a smart person and don't do such impulsive things. What if I insist on doing it? Then we'll be very sorry, Mr. Williams. Don't forget, Stuart Runkle, the lead of The Kid in the Home, is also an artist signed by CAA. If you go against CAA, don't even think about successfully filming the second part of The Kid in the Home. It seems that CAA has become so arrogant that they've forgotten their duty. Eric still had a sneer on his face. Don't forget, you're an agency. Everything you do has to put the interests of your clients first. Only then can you survive for a long time. Horner Willie retorted. Mr. Williams, you don't have to remind us of this. We've always done this. Even if we can't reach an agreement, Richard will still get the lead role in another movie as compensation. What CAA doesn't lack the least is high-quality movie projects. I hope that after Pretty Woman is released, Mr. Richard Gere will still feel that he's received enough compensation. Eric's tone had a hint of meaning. He stood up and said, Mr. Willie, there's no need for us to talk anymore. Please go back and tell Mr. Michael Ovitz that although there's no one in Hollywood that can't be replaced, but as long as there's an actor in CAA that I like, I'll continue to send out invitations and won't accept any of CAA's conditions. I hope you have the courage to continue to refuse. Horner Willie coldly looked at Eric. I also hope you won't regret today's decision. After that, he didn't intend to say anything else. He took his briefcase and left. Chapter 54. The door to the conference room was pushed open again. Jeffrey Hansen and Capel Sid walked in. When they saw Eric's gloomy face, they knew that the negotiation had failed. Capel knew that this matter definitely had something to do with him. Otherwise, the almost outdated Richard Gere wouldn't have pushed a film contract with such a popular director like Eric. Eric, why don't I resign and go to Europe? Although the European film industry is in a slump now, it's still easy for me to find a job with my ability. Eric stretched out his hand and rubbed his stiff face. No, I won't make any compromises. Capel, you just have to do your job well. By the way, have you signed the contract with Julia? What do you think of her? I went to see Julia Roberts in Modern Cinderella and talked to her for a while. To be honest, Eric, I don't think highly of her potential. This lady only received short-term acting training. Her acting skills are average, and her appearance isn't outstanding either. Capel's words became slower and slower. He looked at Eric's expression from time to time and remembered that Julia Roberts was recommended by Eric. Coupled with the scandal that appeared in the newspaper, the relationship between the two was definitely not ordinary. He was a little worried that Eric would be unhappy if he said it so bluntly. However, after Capel finished speaking, Eric nodded in agreement. Actually, I think so too. Then why did you let her be the female lead? Jeffrey asked. He had always wanted Eric to change to a more famous female lead. Because I have a feeling that Julia will definitely be popular in America in the future. She will rush to the Oscars and become famous all over the world. Eric had just opened his mouth when he saw Jeffrey and Capel's faces show a "who are you kidding" expression at the same time. Eric smiled and changed his words. "Okay, I'm just kidding. Actually, although beautiful woman has a beautiful woman in the name, it's impossible to find a girl who is too beautiful to act in. Julia's image is just right in my opinion. If the female lead is too beautiful, it's easy for the audience to shift their attention to the female lead's face and ignore the deeper theme of the movie. If in the future, the audience can only think of a beautiful face after watching the movie, that would be the failure of our movie." Jeffrey and Capel had already read the script of Beautiful Woman. After listening to Eric's analysis and combining it with the content of the script, they finally agreed with Eric's point of view. "Now, the most important thing for us is to find a male lead." Eric looked at the two in front of him. "Although I like Richard Gill the most, since he rejected me, we have to choose another actor. Do you have any good suggestions? What about Michael Douglas?" Jeffrey was the first to suggest. In last year's Wall Street, Douglas played the role of a stock tycoon. Is it very similar to Edward's setting in Beautiful Woman? Eric had just recalled the movie Wall Street when he heard Capel remind him softly. "Eric, Michael Douglas' agency is also CAA." The three of them were silent for a while before Eric said, "Capel, you're a professional in this field. You can handle this matter. Quickly compile a list of suitable actors to play Edward and arrange an audition. We don't have much time." Capel nodded and said, "No problem. If there's nothing else, I'll do it right away." After Eric nodded in response, Capel hurriedly left the meeting room. Watching Capel leave, Jeffrey sighed softly. "Eric, do you really think it's worth it? You mean the bad relationship with CAA because of Capel?" Jeffrey nodded. "It doesn't matter if it's worth it or not. Jeffrey, my situation is different from others. You'll understand in the future. Maybe other film companies are afraid of falling out with a giant like CAA, but I don't have such scruples. I really don't understand where you get your confidence from." Jeffrey shook his head. "Eric, you mentioned before about the sponsorship of the sports car in the movie. I contacted the Ferrari executives in Los Angeles. Originally, they readily agreed to provide us with sports cars for free. After understanding the content of the movie, they hesitated when they heard that the female lead was a prostitute. I think we should contact other sports car brands." "No problem." Although Eric liked Ferrari, he didn't insist since the other party gave up on this promotional opportunity. Recalling Jeffrey's words, Eric suddenly thought of a problem. "Jeffrey, you just said that they agreed to provide us with sports cars for free?" Jeffrey didn't understand what Eric meant. He seriously thought about it and nodded. "You didn't mention money?" Jeffrey said, "Eric, with your current fame, it's very easy to find a sports car brand to sponsor a movie for free. We don't need to give them money at all." "I mean..." Eric waved his right hand in distress. "They're giving us money?" Jeffrey was surprised. "How is that possible? Product placement should have been around a long time ago." However, looking at Jeffrey's reaction, Eric understood that the concept of using product placement to increase movie income hadn't taken root in people's minds yet. In the era before he transmigrated, product placement in movies and TV series had reached a scale of more than $20 billion per year. "Jeffrey, think about it. According to the script, the sports car in the movie will appear one after another in the first 20 minutes. There will even be a scene where the female lead introduces the performance of the sports car. This is equivalent to a 20-minute sports car commercial. Let's say my movie gets $100 million at the North American box office. That's equivalent to 10 million people watching this commercial. Coupled with the number of people watching the movie worldwide and the number of people watching the movie after the release of the videotape, this number will be even larger. Even 10 or 20 years later, every time people watch this movie, they will still watch this sports car commercial. Do you understand how much of an advertising effect this will have?" Jeffrey nodded thoughtfully. "So, organize what I just said and separately lobby the executives of the car companies. Remember, sponsorship less than $1 million is off the table. Eric, Isn't US $1 million too much? Also, what you just said is just a hypothesis. What if the movie doesn't do well? Eric said. This method is easy to solve. We can agree on a box office number with the other party. If the box office doesn't meet expectations, part of the sponsorship will be returned. Jeffrey pressed on. What if it exceeds the target? Eric said helplessly to this long-winded old man, Jeffrey, these specific details are for you to consider as the producer. I still have a lot of things to do. You can't make me worry about these things, right? As he said that, a staff member knocked on the office door and said, Mr. Williams, the clothes custom-made according to your sketches have been sent over. Do you want to see it for yourself? Okay, I'll be right there. Let Julia change first. Eric agreed and chatted with Jeffrey for a while before saying, Jeffrey, let's go and see the style I designed for Julia. After walking out of the well-soundproofed conference room, they heard faint knocking sounds. Some of the office rooms were still being renovated by workers. When they arrived at an audition room that was more than 30 square meters, Julia had already changed into the classic singlet, short skirt, and boots from Pretty Woman. She was wearing a red coat outside. Eric only took one look and frowned. Where's the wig? I remember specifically telling you before. It's in the changing room. Do I have to bring it now? Julia asked. Eric waved his hand. Hurry up and change. We still have to take the makeup photos later. Julia obediently walked into the changing room, and the female assistant named Allison, who had just been assigned to her by the agency, tactfully followed her in to help. Soon, Julia walked out again. Not only was she wearing a blonde wig, but she also had a small black hat on her head. The moment she appeared, the eyes of everyone in the audition room couldn't help but light up. Against the backdrop of the wig, Julia's face was faintly stunning. If Julia's original appearance could only be given a 6 out of 10, now it was at least an 8 out of 10. When Eric saw Julia's appearance, he still felt that something was wrong. However, he simply instructed the photographer next to him to take some photos of Julia. After that, Eric said, you can all leave. I'll talk to Julia. The staff members left one after another. Jeffrey also got up and said goodbye. After everyone left the audition room, Julia pinched the corner of her clothes and asked uneasily, Eric, is there a problem? I saw that you've been frowning. Julia felt that what had happened in the past few days was like a dream. First, she was inexplicably coaxed into bed by Eric and received a ridiculous promise. For the next week, Eric didn't contact her again. Just when she was disappointed and thought that Eric's previous words were just a toy with her, he suddenly called her again. After hurriedly signing an agency contract, Eric threw a stack of scripts in front of her. The female lead is yours. Don't disappoint me. Chapter 55. Eric didn't answer. He continued to sit on the sofa and stared at Julia for a long time. Julia, make a nonchalant expression. A few minutes later, Eric finally spoke. Julia heaved a sigh of relief. When Eric was frowning and thinking, the oppressive aura emitted from his body made her a little breathless. After a while, she struck a pose according to Eric's request. She stared at the ground with a nonchalant expression. Walk a few rounds. Eric stretched out his finger and gestured at the empty space in front of him. Julia walked according to Eric's instructions. Okay, stop. Eric's tone was full of displeasure. Julia, have you read the script seriously? Julia quickly nodded. Of course, I've memorized most of the lines. Then you're Vivian now. Treat me as Edward and try to act. Seeing Eric sitting there with a lazy expression, coupled with the fact that Eric had just chased everyone out, Julia inexplicably thought of the rumor about the audition sofa. She almost blurted out her rejection, but in the end, she sighed in her heart and secretly comforted herself. It's not like I haven't done it before. Julia took off her red coat and put it aside. Then, she walked in front of Eric. After a while, Julia came out of the bathroom and said, Mr. Williams, are you satisfied now? Of course. Eric smiled and looked at the girl who was pretending to be arrogant. He said, However, Julia, you obviously misunderstood me. You? When Julia heard Eric's words, she was stunned. Her face turned red and white, and it quickly changed several times. Suddenly, she threw the tissue in her hand at Eric. Then why didn't you stop me just now? Eric laughed and dodged the tissue. He said, I'm a normal man. How can I refuse such a thing? You bastard. Julia cursed, and an extremely embarrassed feeling surfaced in her heart. Her body went limp, and she sat on the ground. She buried her head in her arms and wept softly. Eric quickly stopped smiling and sighed. He walked to Julia's side and squatted down, patting the girl's shoulder. Julia, don't cry. I was wrong just now. Do you think I'm cheap now? Julia didn't stop crying as she asked in between sobs. Of course not. Eric sat down next to Julia and pulled the girl into his arms. He comforted her. You're just a little unconfident. Perhaps you've also noticed that Jeffrey and Kapoor don't think highly of you. This has given you a strong sense of danger. Julia, believe me, since I gave you the female lead role, I must have thought it through carefully. You have to know that there are a lot of people waiting to see my next movie fail at the box office. Thank you, Eric. You working hard to film the movie well is the greatest thank you to me. Now, let's talk about your problem. The two of them stood up together. Julia hurriedly touched up her makeup and sat down opposite Eric. Now, Julia, I'll tell you where your biggest problem lies. In the script, Vivian is a prostitute, a very professional prostitute. So, before Edward modified her, her every move, every frown, every smile, and every word had to be in line with this profession. And through my observation just now, although this outfit makes you more beautiful, you don't have the flirtatious charm that Vivian should have. You're still the waitress in my previous impression. Julia thought about Eric's words. After Eric finished speaking, she said, Eric, should I try again? Eric shook his head. No need, Julia. I'll give you a task now. From now on, go to the streets where the prostitutes appear every night and observe them. Try to imitate their words and actions. I'll go to New York during the Christmas period. When I come back, I'll give you a test. Wear this outfit at night and stand on the street with a lot of people. If there are less than 10 men hitting on you within an hour, you'll fail. Julia opened her mouth unconfidently. Eric, 10. Isn't that a little too much? It's settled then. Eric didn't give the girl a chance to bargain. If your performance is too bad, I don't mind replacing you. Julia could only nod. Eric thought for a while and instructed, when you do this, don't go to remote streets. Remember to bring your assistant. It's safer with 2 people. Julia's heart warmed. Thank you, Eric. Richard Gere's refusal to act in Eric's new film was quickly exposed by people with ulterior motives. For a time, the newspaper's opinion that Eric had been blacklisted by CAA was rampant. Under the tireless pursuit of the paparazzi, CAA and Eric both argued that the two sides didn't cooperate because they couldn't agree on the pay and schedule. No matter what the truth was, neither side had the intention of letting the media hype it up. After all, it wasn't to the extent of falling out with each other. MGM's United Artists seized the opportunity to announce a new film. Richard Gere was going to act in an action drama film based on a true story, Mighty Dragon. United Artists originally planned to release the film in May, so they didn't plan to start shooting immediately. However, after CAA recommended Richard Gere as the male lead, MGM's United Artists felt that this was a good opportunity to use Eric's new film. They decisively decided to shoot the film in advance and also confirmed the Easter schedule. Their intention to compete with Eric's new film was very obvious. The newspapers were abuzz. Barry Diller couldn't help but call Eric personally to ask about the situation. Although Fox had some expectations for Eric's new film, they were more concerned about the second part of The Kid in Charge. If CAA really blacklisted Eric's film company, the second part of The Kid in Charge would definitely be greatly hindered. Don't worry, Mr. Diller. If this really happens at the end of the year, I will consider letting Fox produce the sequel. I'm sorry, I've been very busy recently. I'm afraid I don't have time. Okay, that's all. Goodbye. Eric put down the phone and looked at the thick stack of actor information in front of him. He looked up at Capel Sid, whose eyes were bloodshot. Eric comforted him. Capel, you don't have to work so hard. No matter what, your health is the most important. Capel only used a little more than a day to find the details of dozens of actors that met Eric's requirements. Eric was touched. At the same time, Eric was sure that he didn't misjudge Capel. Thank you for your concern, Eric. It's okay. I used to work on a film project and didn't sleep for 2 days and 2 nights. Eric nodded. He opened the folder and looked through it carefully. Most of these actors were artists from William Morris Agency and International Innovation Management. Some of them were from small agencies, and some even didn't have an agency for the time being. Their relatives were their agents. As Eric flipped through the information, he pulled out the actors he liked and planned to contact them for auditions. Suddenly, Eric saw someone special. Capel, Al Pacino's information says that he doesn't have an agency now. What's going on? Chapter 56. Kapoor glanced at it and said, "It's like this." Around 1985, Al Pacino starred in a big production that Warner invested nearly $30 million in. In the end, he only earned about $300,000 at the box office. Due to the pressure, he chose to temporarily retire from acting. I heard that Al is looking to make a comeback recently, so I added him to the list. Thinking of the delicate and violent blind lieutenant colonel in Knowing a Woman by Smelling Her Scent, Eric couldn't help but ask, "Kapoor, is it possible for us to sign Al under UTA?" Kapoor hesitated and said, "I can try my best." After all, Al Pacino is one of the 4 geniuses who rose to prominence in the 1970s. Although the 1985 film failed miserably at the box office, there were no problems with Al's performance. He was nominated for Best Actor at the Oscars 4 times. Since he has already released the signal to make a comeback, I believe that many agencies will fight to rope him in. We don't have any advantage. Eric knew that what Kapoor said was the truth, so he could only say, "No matter what, we have to try to contact him." "Oh right, send the invitation for the male lead of Pretty Woman as soon as possible. If possible, I hope that Al Pacino can play Edward." "Okay," Kapoor replied and pointed to the list of actors that Eric had picked out. "Then, Eric, do we still need to inform these people to audition?" "Not for now. You can contact Al Pacino first. If the other party refuses, we will contact these people." In the next few days, Eric began to non-stop auditions for supporting roles, filming scenes, and contacting shooting locations. Every night, he had to draw up the script for the scenes until late at night. At the same time, Eric also took the time to contact a girls' boarding high school in Los Angeles and threw in a large sum of sponsorship money. Although it was less than 10 days before the Christmas holidays, he still rushed the fake Loli who was lazing around in the villa to school. This girl who had nothing to do and her mind was full of nonsense was too scary. She had even awakened her night attack skills without anyone teaching her. If she continued to cause trouble, there would definitely be trouble. "Eric, I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first?" The next day, Jeffrey had just sat in the office and looked at the budget report for a while when he forgot to knock on the door and rushed in. When Eric saw that Jeffrey's expression was still filled with joy, he smiled and said, "Let's have a good one first to calm the nerves." Jeffrey took out a contract from his briefcase and handed it to Eric. "Lamborghini has agreed to our sponsorship proposal. They are about to launch a new Lamborghini Monster sports car." After listening to my explanation, they quickly agreed. "Look, this is the contract. It's a whole $1 million USD. If the news gets out, those in the same industry will go crazy with jealousy." How many movies have worked so hard but still haven't earned $1 million? Eric took the contract and looked at it. Lamborghini had indeed agreed to pay $1 million USD advertising fee, but the premise was that the North American box office of Pretty Woman reached $100 million USD. According to this base, if the box office was lower than $100 million USD, the advertising fee would be refunded proportionally. Of course, Lamborghini would also add on the higher part. This kind of product placement sponsorship was very common in the future, so Eric wasn't too excited. He even teased Jeffrey, "Jeffrey, it's too early for you to be happy. If the box office of our movie doesn't meet expectations, the advertising fee will still be refunded." Jeffrey calmed down and thought of this possibility. He hesitated and said, "It shouldn't be." "Eric, haven't you always been very confident in this movie?" Eric waved his hand. "Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Let's talk about the bad news." The bad news is that I contacted several famous jewelry companies, but they were not willing to sponsor Vivian's jewelry. Only one jewelry company reluctantly agreed to provide us with a set of jewelry to help with the shooting. It would be strange if the other party agreed. Eric laughed and said, "Jeffrey, although I'm very happy that you can draw inferences from one case, you may have forgotten that Vivian's identity is a prostitute. It's good that they agreed to provide the jewelry for the shooting." "That's true. I was a little thoughtless." Jeffrey quickly understood and said tentatively, "Eric, why don't you change Vivian to a white-collar worker?" "I can definitely—" "Don't even think about it, Jeffrey. It's stupid to change the script for advertising sponsorship. You'd better be an honest producer. Don't expect me to listen to your suggestions on the content of the movie." Okay, I know I have a record." Jeffrey smiled awkwardly and said, "Eric, has Al Pacino responded? I heard that you want to invite him to play the male lead. Kapoor is contacting him. But last night, Kapoor called me and said that Al Pacino is now in New York. Apparently, he wants to play the play on Broadway for a while." "Then you have to make up your mind as soon as possible," Jeffrey persuaded. "It's going to be the Christmas holidays soon. If the male lead hasn't been decided by then, the plan to start shooting immediately after the Christmas holidays will definitely be put on hold." Eric nodded confidently. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." In this era, the US dollar was still quite strong. $1 million for advertising sponsorship was definitely a huge sum of money. The Beverly Hills mansion that was worth tens of millions of US $20 years later was only worth millions now. Lamborghini's upcoming Monster Series sports car was priced at $240,000. After spending such a large sum of money, Lamborghini quickly released the news in order to achieve the best publicity effect. For a time, all kinds of envious, jealous, and hateful words filled the newspaper pages. The Los Angeles Times joked. Rumor has it that Eric Williams's new production cost is only $7 million, and he recouped 1/7 of the investment through Lamborghini's advertising sponsorship. It seems that our young director Miracle is not only a film genius, but also a business genius. The Hollywood Information raised doubts. $1 million in sponsorship. Is Eric Williams planning to shoot a sports car commercial that is more than 100 minutes long? According to the title of Pretty Woman revealed by Firefly Films, it's hard for me to associate it with a Lamborghini sports car. I'm starting to doubt the quality of Eric Williams' new film. These were only the milder words. The latest issue of Film Review fiercely criticized. Eric Williams is like a rascal who broke into Hollywood to mess things up. $1 million in advertising sponsorship is simply blasphemy to the art of film. Once Eric Williams' product placement model succeeds, it can be imagined that driven by huge profits, those profit-seeking producers will place advertisements in movies on a large scale in order to earn more profits. Therefore, we call on all people who love the art of film to not go to the cinema to watch Eric Williams' new film. Unfortunately, the style of Film Review was a bit high-end. Although the American people like to watch movies, they weren't too interested in this kind of serious film magazine. Therefore, this comment only caused some waves in the circle of old-fashioned and conservative filmmakers, but it didn't cause much of an impact. The turmoil of the outside world did not have any impact on Eric. He was still methodically preparing for Pretty Woman. Of course, except for the undecided male lead, the preparations for Pretty Woman were coming to an end. Eric basically did not have to show up for the remaining trivial matters. They were all taken care of by Jeffrey. "Eric, if you insist on inviting Al Pacino, you may have to go to New York," Kapoor said as he sat opposite Eric with a tired face. Eric got up and personally made a cup of coffee for Kapoor. he asked. "Can you tell me the reason? Al Pacino has some doubts about your script and has been hesitant. Therefore, he proposed to talk to you in person, but he can't come to Los Angeles because during this time, he is performing Richard III in a theater on Broadway." Eric thought about it. He originally planned to go to New York to see Jennifer Aniston during Christmas. If he did not show his face to declare his sovereignty, he would lose a lot if the girl threw herself into someone else's arms. "No problem. I just happen to be going to New York. Kapoor, can you come with me? Maybe we can try to persuade Al to join UTA?" Kapoor nodded. "I also have this plan. Al currently only has a personal manager and no management company. No matter what, I have to fight for it. Then that's it. Buy a plane ticket as soon as possible. Tonight or tomorrow is fine. If we can't reach an agreement, I have to fly back to contact other male actors for auditions." After discussing this matter, Eric drove out of the company and headed to a girls' school near the Rose Bowl in the north of Los Angeles. Drew had just been sent here a few days ago. As soon as they met, the girl began to complain with a sad face, "Eric, I beg you, please change to another school for me. How about I convert to Scientology, Satanism, or something like that? Catholic schools are so boring, and they are all girls. I will be taught until I become stupid." Eric smiled and knocked on the girl's head. His soul came from the East and he did not have any religion. The reason why he sent Drew here was because he listened to Jeffrey's suggestion. Catholic boarding schools were very strict. They could properly restrain and polish Drew's overly jumpy and unscrupulous personality. "Okay, Drew, there's no way you can transfer schools. I paid a large amount of sponsorship money. I came to tell you that I will be going to New York in 2 days. If everything goes well, I will probably be back after Christmas. You have the key to my house. If you don't want to go home during the holidays, you can go to my place. If you need anything, call Jeffrey. He will help you." Drew heard Eric's words and said unhappily, "Are you going to find Jennifer Aniston?" Eric did not deny it. He nodded and said a few more words. Then he drove away in a hurry under Drew's resentful gaze. Chapter 57. Workaholics usually didn't differentiate between cold and warm. Eric and Kapoor happened to be this type of person, so they ended up in tragedy together. After buying tickets to New York, the two of them quickly boarded the plane with simple luggage. When they arrived in New York, it was already 7 o'clock in the evening. They went from the warm Los Angeles to the Four Seasons of New York. As soon as they got off the plane, the cold air made the two men, who were only wearing thin jackets, shiver. "Looks like we both need a personal assistant," Eric said as he walked out of a fashion store. He had already changed into a thick trench coat. Kapoor said with envy, "That's you. UTA is so small right now. I can't afford to hire a personal assistant." "Don't worry, it'll get better soon." Kapoor just smiled and asked, "Are you going to the hotel with me, or are you going to find your girlfriend?" "I haven't seen Jenny in so many days. I plan to go to her place first. I already gave you Jenny's number on the plane. Contact Al Pacino and set a time as soon as possible." "Okay," Kapoor shrugged. "I hope you won't be kicked out. I heard you talk about that girl on the plane. I think with her personality, it's very possible." "Haha, you don't have to worry about that." According to the address Drew gave him, he took a taxi and drove around Manhattan for a long time before he finally found Aniston's apartment and came to the door. Eric played with a bouquet of roses in his hand and tidied up his clothes before he knocked on the door. He waited for a while but didn't get a response. He knocked a few more times before he confirmed that Jennifer Aniston wasn't back yet. Eric turned his head and looked at the large flower pot next to the door. He smiled. It seemed like Jennifer Aniston's habit couldn't be changed. Jennifer Aniston always liked to put a spare key outside the door. Eric once analyzed it in front of Jennifer Aniston. This was a manifestation of a person's insecurities. However, the headstrong girl refused to admit it. She rattled off a bunch of reasons to refute Eric's point. Eric found the key in the flower pot and opened the door. He walked in with his luggage. He turned on the lights. It was still decorated with warm colors. After not eating for 5 to 6 hours, Eric opened the fridge and took a look. He decided to make supper for himself and Jennifer Aniston. After putting on an apron, Eric took out the ingredients and got busy in the kitchen. 20 minutes later, when Eric was preparing the last dish, the soft sound of a key turning in the lock came from outside. Eric ran to the living room, picked up the roses, and hid behind the door. The door was pushed open, and Eric was about to speak with a smile when the three of them froze in place. That's right, there were 3 of them. Eric, Jennifer Aniston, and Brad Pitt. Eric, why are you here? The strange silence lasted for a few seconds. Jennifer Aniston stuttered and asked first. At the same time, she wailed in her heart, "It's over, Eric must have misunderstood." Eric stuffed the roses into Jennifer Aniston's hand and turned to Brad Pitt. He forced a smile, but his eyes were cold. "Hello, Mr. Pitt, we meet again." "Hello, Mr. Williams." Brad Pitt reached out his hand, but found that Eric had no intention of shaking hands with him. He could only withdraw his hand awkwardly. Although they only met once during the audition for Back to 17, Eric rose at a mythical speed. It was not easy for Pitt to forget this young man. After greeting him, Eric had no intention of moving aside to let him in. He continued, "Mr. Pitt, thank you for sending my girlfriend back. If there's nothing else, you can leave." Pitt's face became a little embarrassed. He turned to look at Jennifer Aniston. Jennifer Aniston had been with Eric for several months. How could she not feel the anger emanating from Eric at this time? But she still straightened her back and retorted, "Eric, you can't do this. Brad is my guest." This somewhat intimate Brad completely ignited Eric's anger. He suddenly raised his voice and glared at Jennifer Aniston. He pointed inside the house and said, "Shut up, get in." It was the first time Jennifer Aniston saw Eric so angry. She subconsciously shrank her neck. She was a little guilty when Eric saw her bringing a man home, but the courage she mustered completely disappeared in Eric's angry roar. She lowered her head and muttered, "Why are you being so fierce?" But she still obediently moved into the house. Bang! Ignoring Brad Pitt, who was standing there in a daze, Eric slammed the door. "Tell me, what's going on?" Eric sat on the sofa, took out a cigarette and lit it in annoyance. He took a deep puff and asked. If it was another man, Eric might have calmed down and figured out the truth first. But it just had to be Brad Pitt. Thinking of the entanglement between the two in his previous life, Eric couldn't calm down no matter what. If it was before, if Eric dared to smoke in her house, Jennifer Aniston would have gone crazy. But now, she only opened her mouth but didn't say anything to stop him. He's going to play a role in the next few episodes of Mary in Action. He just joined the cast the day before yesterday. We've only known each other for 2 days. There's nothing going on between us. Jennifer Aniston explained weakly. You've only known each other for 2 days and you brought him home? Eric snorted coldly. I got off work a little late today. He said it wasn't safe for me to go home alone, so he offered to send me home. Why do I have to explain it to you? Jennifer Aniston suddenly realized something as she spoke. She glared at Eric and said, I've already broken up with you. Do you think you're allowed to mess around with other women, but I can't have a boyfriend? Eric crushed the cigarette and pulled Jennifer Aniston over. Oh. After testing the water temperature, Jennifer Aniston stood under the shower, naked. She applied shower gel on her body while she thought about what was wrong with her. Didn't she already decide to break up with that bastard? They've only just met and she's already lost herself in a daze. Although when she bumped into Drew and Eric, she impulsively wrote that note to break up with them. But when Jennifer Aniston came to New York alone, every little detail of their time together would always appear in her mind. It was as if she was addicted to drugs. It was as if there was a bird constantly circling her mind, chirping, Eric, 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 Eric. At the same time, Jennifer Aniston also unconsciously developed the habit of looking for information about Eric from newspapers and television. When someone scolded him, she would get angry. When someone praised him, she would dance like a little girl. When someone wanted to scheme against him, she would immediately forget to be angry and take the initiative to call the other party. Forget it, I'll forgive you one more time. Jennifer Aniston finally convinced herself. Perhaps she had already convinced herself in her heart. After making this decision, Jennifer Aniston seemed to have put down a big rock and her whole body relaxed a lot. She twisted her slender waist in front of the full-length mirror. After several months of continuous slimming down, Jennifer Aniston had now completely become a graceful lady. No one would associate the word fat with her anymore. She put on a bathrobe and walked out of the bathroom to find Eric on the phone. "Thank you, James. When we get back to Los Angeles, I'll treat you to a meal." Of course, I know that one meal is definitely not enough." "Haha, that's it, goodbye." "Eric, who are you calling?" Eric put down the phone and said casually, "James, I need his help with something." "Okay, let's hurry up and eat, the dishes are cold." Chapter 58. Eric, Drew, moved into your house? Eric nodded and told Jennifer Aniston the whole story. Jennifer Aniston said jealously, "But, you're not related to her. Why are you spending so much money on her?" "It's $1 million. You've never spent so much money on me." "Humph, you must be up to something." "I just treat Drew as a sister. You're my girlfriend. If you want, I'm willing to spend 10 million or even 100 million for you." Jennifer Aniston could hear the sincerity in Eric's tone. She felt a little sweet, but pouted and said, "I don't want to spend your money." Al Pacino. He's so manly in the Godfather series. It's a pity that he hasn't made a movie in the past few years. Jennifer Aniston, who had a good time last night, was glowing. She carefully tied her boyfriend's tie. Seeing that Eric was a little jealous when she praised another man, she quickly kissed her boyfriend on the cheek. Okay, my Eric is the most handsome. Al Pacino is already an old man. I was going to invite you to see AL's play on Broadway tonight, but after hearing what you said, I've decided not to." Jennifer Aniston smiled and refused. "Even if you really have such plans, I really don't have time. It's going to be the Christmas holidays soon. The director has been rushing the shoot these days and needs to work overtime." "Eric, will you stay in New York for the Christmas holidays?" Eric shook his head. "I'm not sure. If Al Pacino accepts the invitation, I can stay for Christmas. Otherwise, I have to rush back to Los Angeles to audition for the male lead." "Oh." Jennifer Aniston sounded disappointed. "And, why don't you come back to Los Angeles with me? Isn't your family in Los Angeles?" Jennifer Aniston shook her head and said, "No, I don't want to go back. They have their own families. I feel that it's unnecessary for me to go back." "How could that be? They still love you." "You won't understand, Eric." Jennifer Aniston sighed forlornly and pulled her boyfriend's collar. "All right, Eric, let's go." "Hello, Mr. Pacino." Although Eric had seen countless images of Al Pacino in movies, he was still a little excited to see him in person. "Hello, Eric. Just call me Al." After Kapoor's introduction, the two of them shook hands and sat down together. Without much small talk, Al Pacino asked, "Eric, I've read the outline of the script for Pretty Woman. Maybe you've read it before. Because of what happened in '85, I haven't acted in a movie for 4 years. Although I'm grateful that you invited me while everyone else was still hesitating, I still feel like this script isn't suitable for me." Eric asked, "Al, can you tell me the reason?" Al Pacino said, "This script is a movie that focuses on the female lead. Also, I asked Kapoor before. You want a newcomer named Julia Roberts to play Vivian. I specifically went to watch Miss Julia Roberts' movie, Modern Cinderella. To be honest, her acting was very sparse and ordinary. If the script doesn't make any changes and I play the role of Edward, the performance of the female lead, Vivian, will be completely suppressed by me. In a situation where the actor's abilities are completely unequal, the movie will be neither fish nor fowl." At this point, Al Pacino paused and stared at Eric with bright eyes. He said confidently, "Eric, I'm not being arrogant. I've already been nominated for 5 Oscars. Although I haven't won an award because of the Academy's prejudice against newcomers, this doesn't negate my ability." Eric thought for a moment and soon smiled. He already understood Al Pacino's intentions. This drama addict actually wanted to take the role, but he was somewhat dissatisfied with the script's focus on Vivian. That was why he tried to invite him to New York to talk and persuade him to change the script. Eric asked curiously, "Al, if you play Edward, what changes do you think should be made to the script?" Al Pacino's eyes lit up. He sorted out his thoughts and put forward his own ideas. "First of all, we should increase Edward's screen time and design the character more fully. Also, I don't think Edward's personality is prominent enough." After talking for more than 10 minutes, Al Pacino finally expressed his views. It had to be said that as a veteran actor, many of Al Pacino's suggestions for changes to the script made Eric's eyes light up. If he didn't have a background as a reincarnator and the script was his original, Eric would have nodded and agreed. But now, such a thing was definitely impossible. "Al, actually, you really want to act in this movie, right?" Al Pacino was stunned. Seeing Eric's understanding expression, he quickly spread his hands and smiled. "Yes, I really want to take on this movie, because this is the first script I've received after I revealed my identity as a reincarnator. Other film companies are still hesitant about inviting me to act in their movies. I don't know how long this hesitation will last, so I have to seize this opportunity. Al, your suggestions just now were very pertinent. I'm even a little tempted. However, the script definitely can't be changed. Pretty Woman is a cliché fairy tale about a prince and Cinderella. If we follow your suggestions, we will definitely create the image of a prince with a distinct personality, but this fairy tale will become complicated and realistic. The reason why a fairy tale is that it is almost completely detached from real life and gives people a beautiful fantasy." Al Pacino nodded with some disappointment. His lips moved twice as if he wanted to say something. Eric was the first to speak. "Al, do you know Home Alone?" "Of course, Eric. Although I haven't acted in a movie in the past few years, I pay close attention to news in Hollywood. In that case, you must know that because of the VAM with Columbia, I will receive a large sum of money in the future. So, if you accept the role of Pretty Woman, I can promise you that after this film, I will invest in another film with you as the male lead. In fact, I can guarantee that you will be satisfied with the role." Al Pacino hesitated. "Can you reveal the movie you're talking about in advance?" "Of course." Eric nodded. "I've seen an Italian movie called Feminine Scent before, and I plan to buy its adaptation rights. In the adaptation I envision, you will play a blind lieutenant colonel who has lost interest in life because of his blindness. He plans to have one last time to enjoy himself before committing suicide. So, he hires a high school student to be his guide and begins a series of indulgent trips such as traveling, picking up girls, and racing. In the end, under the guidance of the high school student, the lieutenant colonel finds a new direction in life. That lieutenant colonel is a combination of violent, conceited, depressed, and righteous personality. This is a very complicated role, and it will give you plenty of room to express yourself." Al Pacino became more and more excited as he listened to Eric's narration. In his mind, he even began to figure out how to play the role of the blind lieutenant colonel. After Eric finished speaking, Al Pacino was still immersed in the script of Knowing a Woman by Smelling Her Scent. After a full 5 minutes, he suddenly raised his head and said impatiently, "Eric, I'll take this script. I can even act in it for free. But, I have to finish Pretty Woman first before I can consider anything else." "No problem, I'll take it all. I'll listen to your arrangements during filming. I'll try my best to restrain my acting so as not to affect Miss Julia's performance." Eric keenly felt that this was a good opportunity. He probed, "Al, I heard that you don't have an agency yet. Why don't you come to UTA? Kapoor is a very good agent." Al Pacino hesitated for a moment and said, "Is this a binding condition?" Eric quickly shook his head. "Of course not. This is a very sincere invitation. Even if you don't agree, I'll still let you act in those 2 movies. Al Pacino thought for a moment and said, "Okay, but I know that you have some friction with CAA. If this causes me to be obstructed in the future, I hope I can leave freely." Eric only wanted to win over this talented actor. As for the future, Eric was confident that with so many excellent movies in his mind, it would not be a problem to tie Al Pacino to UTA. "Of course, no problem. I'll have Kapoor draw up a very loose agency contract. You can even leave UTA at any time." "Okay, I agree." Al Pacino quickly nodded. Chapter 59. A petite, brown-haired white woman in her 30s walked out of the set. Her high heels clicked heavily on the cement road, and the crisp sound reflected the woman's annoyance. The tall and handsome Brad Pitt followed the woman dejectedly. They got into a car, and the woman slammed the door shut. She glanced at Brad Pitt in disappointment. "Okay, Pitt, now tell me what happened. Do you know how much effort I put in to get you this role? It's only been 2 days, and you've been kicked out of the cast. I just asked Henry, and he hinted that the problem was with you. The producer personally said hello." Brad Pitt shook his head. "Charissa, I've worked very hard. The director praised my performance yesterday. Besides, didn't we sign a contract with the crew? They're breaching the contract. We can..." "Shut up. Do you think you're Tom Cruise? If you were a top star, of course they wouldn't dare breach the contract. But you're just an unknown actor." Brad Pitt clenched his fists and lowered his head slightly. He was the same age as Tom Cruise, and they came from similar backgrounds. He even felt that his acting skills and appearance weren't much worse than Tom Cruise's. But fate liked to play tricks on people. Tom Cruise was now a hot star, but he was still a nobody. "Pitt, did you do something to anger the director or the producer? Don't try to hide anything from me. I'm your agent. If you hide anything from me, I'll have to consider giving you up." Brad Pitt raised his head worriedly. He had been struggling in Hollywood for several years, and he knew how important it was to have an excellent and well-connected agent. He had signed with Charissa Cody for less than a year, and he had already gotten several roles. Therefore, Brad Pitt had to take Charissa's last sentence seriously. His mind raced as he recalled everything that had happened in the past 2 days. Pitt said uncertainly, "It can't be that, right?" "What is it?" "Hurry up and say it. Don't dawdle." Brad Pitt said, "You should know Jennifer Aniston and Cialisha, right? We ended work a little late yesterday, so I offered to send her home, but her boyfriend saw us. Her boyfriend seems to be very unhappy." As an outstanding agent, Charissa Cody was very well informed. "You mean Eric Williams, the young director of Home Alone?" Brad Pitt nodded. Cialisha covered her forehead in distress. "Pitt, what do you want me to say to you? A few months ago, if Tyson hadn't held back and made a move, the worst that could happen was a comminuted fracture and a few months in the hospital. I didn't expect you to not learn your lesson and go after Eric Williams' woman. Didn't the newspaper say that the two of them had broken up? Also, I think that although the box office of Home Alone is very good, he's just a new Hollywood director after all. He can't have so much power, right?" Cialisha was a little helpless against this man who only had a handsome face but wasn't very smart. She explained, "The Hollywood circle isn't small, but it's not big either. The connections are even more complicated. Film companies and broadcasting companies are inextricably linked. Eric Williams is a very outstanding and young director, so many people want to rope him in. If they just want to mess with an unknown actor like you, maybe it's just a matter of a few phone calls. I believe that many people would be willing to do this small thing to do a favor." Brad Pitt was silent for a while and said, "Then, what do we do now?" Cialisha pondered for a while and said, "Don't you know Eric Williams's current address? You'd better apologize to him in person and be more sincere." "I didn't do anything. Why should I apologize to him?" Brad Pitt was a little resistant. "It doesn't matter whether you did anything or not. The point is that he has already determined that you have offended him. If I apologize, can I get that role back?" Cielicia shook her head. Of course not. The crew has already found a reason to kick you out. They definitely won't slap their own face. I just hope that after you apologize, he won't target you in the future. If you've been in the low-level actor circle, maybe it's nothing. But if you want to have a better career, you have to bow down to the other party this time. Otherwise, in the future, just one word from the other party may cause you to lose a chance to change your career. Brad Pitt lowered his head and was silent for a while before saying, "Okay, I will apologize." "Hey, Jenny, are you free?" Brad Pitt and Cielicia waited outside the set until after 7 o'clock before they saw Jennifer Aniston walk out. "Hello, Mr. Pitt, Ms. Cielicia." When Jennifer Aniston saw Brad Pitt walking towards her, she subconsciously took a step back. Although they had only known each other for 2 days, Jennifer Aniston did have a good impression of Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt was very good at coaxing women, unlike Eric. The two of them were both small-time actors, so there was no difference in status. All of this made Jennifer Aniston feel very relaxed. That was why Jennifer Aniston agreed to Brad Pitt's suggestion to send her home last night. But Eric's appearance extinguished the little flame that Jennifer Aniston had just had for Brad Pitt. At the same time, it poured a bowl of cold water on her. Her boyfriend had almost lost control of his emotions last night, so Jennifer Aniston subconsciously kept a distance from Brad Pitt. "Pitt, I'm very sorry that you left the set, but I have to go back now. Eric is waiting for me at home." When Brad Pitt saw Jennifer Aniston's distant expression, he cursed in his heart. On the surface, he still wore a charming smile and said, "And it's like this. Mr. Williams might have misunderstood me yesterday, so I want to treat you to a meal and apologize to him in person." Jennifer Aniston's little brain spun. She quickly connected the words that she had overheard on the phone with Brad Pitt when she took a shower last night with the words that Brad Pitt had been kicked out of the set today. Just as she was thinking about how to reply to the two people in front of her, a taxi stopped by the side of the road. Eric, who was wearing a black windbreaker, got out of the taxi and walked towards them. The moment he saw Brad Pitt, Eric immediately frowned. At noon, James Brooks had specially called to tell him that the matter had been settled. Thinking about it, shouldn't Brad Pitt have packed his luggage and left by now? He walked up to Jennifer Aniston in 2 or 3 steps and asked with concern, "Jenny, what's going on?" Jennifer Aniston looked at her boyfriend with a complicated expression. Before she could speak, Charissa Cody smiled and reached out her hand. "Hello, Mr. Williams. I'm Pitt's agent. My name is Charissa Cody." "Hello." Eric shook hands with her. "Miss Cody, why are you stopping my girlfriend? Is something the matter?" "It's like this, Mr. Williams." Charissa Cody did not mind Eric's cold tone. She still had a faint smile on her face. "Pitt's behavior last night was a little abrupt, so we were wondering if we could invite you to dinner to express our apologies." Eric glanced between Charissa Cody and Brad Pitt. Although Brad Pitt was forcing a smile, the unwillingness in his expression was still obvious. On the other hand, the petite female agent in front of him had a flawless performance. Eric did not care about Brad Pitt's feelings. In his previous life, this famous little B***TCH in Hollywood had a long string of exposed achievements in picking up girls that made many men envious, jealous, and hateful. The 2 actresses who played the Rachel sisters in Friends did not escape his clutches. At this time, Jennifer Aniston seemed a little naive when it came to relationships. If he had not appeared in time, this little girl might have been fooled by Pitt's flowery words. Moreover, once this happened, with Jennifer Aniston's stubborn personality, it would not be easy to salvage the situation. In order to prevent the two from coming into contact, Eric decisively took measures to kick Brad Pitt out of the cast. For this, he did not hesitate to owe James Brooks a big favor. "There's no need for dinner. I accept Mr. Pitt's apology. As long as he doesn't pester my girlfriend again, I will not pursue this matter in the future." After Eric finished speaking, he hugged Jennifer Aniston and was about to leave. After thinking about it, he could not help but say, "Ms. Charissa, you are a very outstanding agent. It is Brad Pitt's honor to have an agent like you. If you are interested, you can go to Los Angeles. I welcome you to join UTA at any time. Charissa Cody had just breathed a sigh of relief when she got Eric's promise to let go of Brad Pitt. When she heard Eric's next words, she quickly showed a flattered expression and said, "Thank you for your invitation, Mr. Williams. I will consider it." Chapter 60. After parting ways with Charissa Cody and Brad Pitt, the two of them were not in a hurry to go back. Jennifer Aniston held onto Eric's arm, and the two of them strolled along the bustling streets of New York at night. After saying a few irrelevant words, Jennifer Aniston could not help but say, "Eric, I think you went a little overboard." Brad Pitt went through a lot of trouble to get that role. It wasn't easy for him either. Eric reached out and pinched Jennifer Aniston's face, causing the girl to cry out, "Looks like Brad Pitt told his story very inspirational. You already have a good impression of him. That's all the more reason why I should kick him out of the cast. I just think that he's not bad." Jennifer Aniston puffed up her cheeks and glared at Eric. She went all out and spoke her true feelings with an expression that said, "What can you do to me? Do you know Mike Tyson?" Eric's turn was a little abrupt, but Jennifer Aniston still nodded and said, "I know. His divorce with Robin Givens has been a hot topic recently. There's one thing that you definitely don't know. Some time ago, Brad Pitt had an affair with Robin Givens and was blocked by Tyson in the house. The reason why Tyson wanted to divorce Robin Givens was because after she married Tyson, she still had an affair with Brad Pitt." Jennifer Aniston's eyes widened in disbelief. "No way. Why didn't I know? You must be lying to me. Do I need to lie to you about something like this?" Eric spread his hands. Jennifer Aniston asked curiously, "How did you know about this?" Eric said, "It's spread in the industry. It's just that Brad Pitt is not as famous as Tyson. Even some gossip magazines can't be bothered to verify his name. They just replaced him with an unknown actor. In his memory, Brad Pitt was only caught many years later. After a series of scandals, bankruptcy, imprisonment, and so on, Tyson, who no longer cared about his reputation, admitted it in an interview." Eric suddenly thought of something very interesting. Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt were definitely at odds with each other. One had the ability to catch people, and the other was unlucky to always be caught. He was caught by Tyson, by Jennifer Aniston. Later, when he was about to marry Julie, he was playing with his female assistant and was tragically caught on the spot, causing the wedding delay. "So," Eric patted Jennifer Aniston's head and said earnestly, "you can't judge a book by its cover. It's better to stay away from this kind of person." Jennifer Aniston nodded, then looked up at Eric with hidden bitterness. "Yeah, you can't judge a book by its cover. Who knows how many women you've messed with behind your back? You invited a bunch of actresses to your house for a party. It's all over the newspapers. And that shirt. Don't try to deny it." "Okay, Jenny." Eric hurriedly hugged Jennifer Aniston in his arms. "I'm guilty. I regret it. You're a bastard." Eric hurriedly nodded. "Yes, yes, yes." Jennifer Aniston threw a tantrum for a while before calming down. She pressed her face against Eric's chest and listened to her boyfriend's heartbeat. The two of them hugged each other quietly, forming a warm scene on the crowded street. A passing photographer felt that this scene was very heartwarming. He couldn't help but press the shutter and record this scene on film. However, Eric and Jennifer Aniston didn't notice this small detail. As Christmas approached, the photographer printed the photo he took. In the photo, the girl was wearing a short white trench coat. She quietly hugged her boyfriend's waist and leaned against him. The boy in the black trench coat hugged the girl tightly, his chin resting on the girl's soft blonde hair. One in black and one in white, one cold and one warm. Amidst the blurred pedestrians, the two of them seemed to be on a quiet island. Against the backdrop of the brightly lit city, the two of them looked beautiful and romantic. Feeling very satisfied, the photographer sent the photo to a newspaper in New York. As a result, the two of them in the photo were quickly recognized by the editor of the newspaper. The editor, who had a keen sense of professionalism, directly submitted the photo to the chief editor's office. The next day, the photo of the young miracle director Eric Williams and his girlfriend hugging each other on the streets of New York appeared on the front page of the newspaper. However, the article accompanying the photo was extremely gossipy. It took up more than half of the page to describe how Eric had put down the movie he was preparing and resolutely rushed to New York in order to find his true love. In the end, the two of them miraculously met on the streets of New York and hugged each other. Anyone with a bit of intelligence knew that the photo was real, but the story was definitely fabricated. However, the reporter's writing skills were not bad, so most people read it with great interest. The sales of the newspaper even increased slightly. Eric, who had been embroiled in all kinds of news, suddenly disappeared from Los Angeles and reappeared in New York, which attracted the attention of the paparazzi again. They didn't believe that Eric had gone to New York to seek true love, so Eric became the focus of the paparazzi again. The invitation of Al Pacino to be the male lead had been finalized. Therefore, in order to avoid the paparazzi's harassment, Eric basically stayed in Jennifer Aniston's apartment in Manhattan and didn't go out. This time, the paparazzi seemed to be waiting patiently outside Eric's apartment, waiting for Eric to appear. Jennifer Aniston naturally became another focus of the paparazzi. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, at Eric's insistence, Jennifer Aniston no longer took a bus or a taxi to and from the set. Instead, she bought a second-hand car. Jennifer Aniston still didn't let Eric pay a penny. After a few days of intense filming, the crew of Jennifer Aniston's TV series finally welcomed the 2-week Christmas and New Year holidays. At Jennifer Aniston's house, the girl picked up the newspaper for the umpteenth time and read the article on it. With a trace of anger and joy, she complained to her boyfriend, who was sitting by the window typing on a typewriter, "It's all your fault. We have a group of paparazzi following us everywhere we go. Otherwise, I could take you around New York." Eric finished typing a line of letters and turned around with a smile. "Why do I feel that your eyes are full of joy? The reporter who wrote the article is really a genius. He could make up a New York love story with just a photo." "Eric, have you contacted the newspaper?" Eric nodded. The photo was taken by an amateur photographer on the street. He was going to participate in the newspaper's photo collection, but the editor had sharp eyes and recognized us. Eric took out an envelope and handed it to Jennifer Aniston. "This is the negative. I bought it for $1,000. But it's worth it. This photo is really beautiful. It's worth collecting." Jennifer Aniston took the envelope and carefully took out the negative to look at it. Then, she gently put it back. "There's one more thing, Jenny. Although the article in the newspaper is nonsense, it gave me a good script. Look, it's changed according to our real life. How about you be the female lead?" Jennifer Aniston put the negative into an album and walked over to her boyfriend. She took a stack of scripts from him and started reading. After reading it, Jennifer Aniston put down the script and wrinkled her nose. "Apart from the last coincidental meeting, it has nothing to do with us." Eric spread his hands and quibbled, "Art is always processed many times. How about it? Are you going to act in it or not?" Jennifer Aniston hesitated for a moment before shaking her head. "The female lead is a bit older than me. Plus, I don't want to act in a movie directed by you." Eric didn't try to persuade her again. He gradually let Jennifer Aniston's insistence take its course. Christmas soon came. In his previous life, Eric didn't have a deep impression of this Western holiday. When he was young, Christmas wasn't popular in the East. By the time Western holidays became popular, he was already middle-aged. It was impossible for him to chase after these things like young people. Kapoor had already returned to Los Angeles, and Al Pacino had his own life. After that day, Eric didn't see Al again. However, the two of them discussed the script of Pretty Woman over the phone every day. Therefore, it was only him and Jennifer Aniston spending Christmas together. This made Jennifer Aniston quite satisfied. The two of them decorated the room together, chose a Christmas tree together, and handled the turkey together. They didn't go out on Christmas Eve. They quietly leaned on the sofa and watched videos late into the night. After Christmas, Eric had no choice but to return to Los Angeles. It was true that Pretty Woman would start filming after the holidays, but as the director, he had a lot of work to do in advance. Although Jennifer Aniston was very reluctant, she had no choice but to drive her boyfriend to the airport. She watched the plane disappear into the horizon before reluctantly returning to the apartment. Chapter 61. Runkle and his family didn't come? In the corner of the party, Jeffrey held a glass of red wine and asked casually. It was the second day after he returned to Los Angeles. In order to thank everyone for their help over the past 6 months, Eric specially held a private party in his mansion in Beverly Hills. In the past 6 months, he had interacted with James Brooks, Penny Marshall, Jeffrey Hansen, Michael Krause, Edward Lewis, and some other actors and actresses that he had met during the filming of Back to 17 and Home Alone. All of them were invited by Eric. In addition to the partners of the guests, there were close to 50 people. Fortunately, Eric had moved to another place, so there was no awkward situation like the first party. When he heard Jeffrey's words, Eric shook his head indifferently. I personally called to invite him, but Charlson rejected. Jeffrey was worried. I heard that under CAA's arrangement, Stuart Runkle has accepted 3 movie contracts until the end of next year. Eric, what's your plan? Eric comforted him. Don't worry, Jeffrey. CAA wants to use the sequel to Home Alone to threaten us. It's just wishful thinking. You'll understand when Little Stu's movies are released. In his previous life, Macaulay Culkin had taken on many films after he became famous because of Home Alone. However, the box office results were mediocre. Coupled with the high pay that came with his fame, some film producers even lost money because of it. You're saying that Stuart's other movies won't do well? Jeffrey also considered this point. Eric nodded. Everyone knows that Home Alone is an anomaly. I don't deny it either. After all, Little Stu is just a kid. No matter how famous he is, his box office appeal can't compare to adult superstars. Next year, in order to maintain Little Stu's fame, even if it means falling out with CAA, Runkle and his wife will choose to continue working with us. That couple... Eric stopped here with disappointment in his eyes. When he called to invite Runkle's family, Charlson Runkle's attitude towards him was very cold and even a little arrogant. Eric could guess what Charlson was thinking. Perhaps he thought that if it wasn't for his son, Home Alone wouldn't have been as successful as it was now. Some people always think too highly of themselves. But what if Stuart's movie is a big hit? Jeffrey asked. Not to mention that the possibility of this happening is very small. Even if it really happens, then we can negotiate when the time comes. Jeffrey, after Pretty Woman is released, you'll understand that I don't live on Home Alone. As he spoke, he caught a glimpse of Drew in a red dress nonchalantly taking a glass of red wine from the waiter's tray. Eric immediately glared at the girl. Drew realized that her behavior was caught red-handed by Eric. She quickly put the wine glass back, stuck out her tongue, and slipped into a group of young people. Jeffrey noticed Eric's actions and teased, "You're so good to her. Although you're only 18, I still feel like you treat Drew like your own daughter. If you have children in the future, you'll definitely be a very competent father." It's too early to talk about this. I'm only 18. I'm not in a hurry to get married and have children. As he spoke, James Brooks greeted the other guests and came to the two of them. James, thank you for that. Eric raised his wine glass at James. James smiled and said, "It's nothing. I saw the photo in the Los Angeles Times a few days ago. You two look really good together." Speaking of this, Jeffrey also laughed. "Eric, are you sure that photo wasn't specially taken by you? I find it hard to believe that it was taken by an amateur photographer. But that's the truth. I even spent $1,000 to buy the film. I even had an inspiration and conceived a new script." James suddenly became interested. "Eric, if it's convenient, can you reveal the content?" "Of course," Eric said. "The story is between a single father and an engaged female reporter. Eric spent a few minutes talking about the story outline of Sleepless in Seattle. It sounds like the inspiration for the creation of this script came from Golden Jade League. James expressed his opinion. Eric did not deny it. In the script setting, the heroine likes the movie Golden Jade League. If it starts shooting in the future, I even plan to use the theme song of Golden Jade League to pay tribute to her. James thought that if Eric's script was amazing, he would buy it and produce it himself. He could even co-invest with Firefly Films. Eric just owed him a favor. If he asked, Eric would probably not refuse. However, after listening to Eric, James gave up his plan. Eric did not talk too much about the script details of Sleepless in Seattle, so James regarded it as an ordinary romantic love story. Although romantic love movies were a large category of Hollywood movies, there were not many that performed well at the box office. In this era, the types of movies that sold well in Hollywood were more inclined to action movies or science fiction movies. Even thriller movies were more likely to achieve a good box office than romantic love movies. James's lack of interest after listening to the content of the script made Eric relieved. If James asked for this script, he really didn't know how to refuse. Sleepless in Seattle was a movie with a box office of more than 100 million yuan. He was really reluctant to give it away because he owed James a favor. The topic of several people quickly turned to other aspects, and Sleepless in Seattle was temporarily put to the back of their minds. It was not until later that the movie got a total box office of more than $200 million that James Brooks regretted it. Eric, I heard that your Pretty Woman is going to be released on Valentine's Day. I think it's better to be cautious. After the New Year's holiday, there are only 5 weeks until Valentine's Day. In addition to the film's rating, the effective production time is no more than 4 weeks. This is a very risky thing. Eric said confidently. In fact, this movie started preparing 2 weeks ago. Now there is still more than a week before shooting. It's enough for me to consider all the details, so 4 weeks of production time is more than enough. Pretty Woman doesn't have many main scenes, so it's very easy to shoot. Pretty Woman, in his previous life, only took 12 weeks under various kinds of dawdling. During this period, there were also changes in the production company, script style changes, and other events. After shooting a normal movie, the accumulated film material would take up to dozens of hours, and the material for a big production movie would even take more than 100 or 200 hours. It was the shooting of this material that consumed a lot of time. Eric, who already had the complete film in his mind, certainly wouldn't waste so much time. If it weren't for the actors having to go through a lot of shooting to get their emotions in order to get themselves involved in the plot. Eric could even directly shoot the scenes in his memory. Even so, as long as the actors could play their acting skills, Eric was confident that he could compress the film material into less than 10 hours. In this way, 4 weeks of shooting and post-production time was more than enough. Chapter 62. Hi, Penny. How have you been? After chatting with Jeffrey and James for a while, Eric began to socialize with the other guests. Penny Marshall gestured to the 2 guests next to her. The other party tactfully turned and left. It's still the same. I received a lot of script offers, but I'm not satisfied with them, so I decided to take a break for a while. I'm not like you, shooting a second movie so quickly. Eric smiled and said, I had no choice. So many people are waiting to see me make a fool of myself. Of course, I have to give them something to think about. Return to 17 Foot has already grossed $70 million, right? It seems like it's only a matter of time before it breaks the 100 million mark. As a female director, it'll be difficult for anyone to break your record in a short period of time. Penny Marshall was very pleased with Eric's compliment, but she still said, it can't be compared to you. Home Alone recently earned more than 24 million at the box office. Alright, stop complimenting each other. I feel a little sick listening to it. James Brooks suddenly interrupted. Eric, I have something to discuss with Penny. Of course, no problem. Eric nodded and turned to walk to the others. When the reception was about to end, Eric stopped Kapoor, who was about to leave. Kapoor, come with me. I have something to discuss with you. Kapoor nodded and followed Eric to the study on the second floor. The study was a little messy. The original newspaper clippings on the writing board that occupied one wall had been cleaned up. At this time, it was densely covered with Eric's hand-drawn, Pretty Woman split-screen shots. Eric brought back the piano that had been returned to the room by the window. Kapoor was obviously a little surprised by the different and messy style of the room. The other aspects of the villa were very clean. Anyone who suddenly came here would feel out of place. Eric stuffed a few folders on the desk into the bookshelf and explained, "This is where I write. The cleaners are not allowed to come in, so it's a little messy." "Doesn't Drew live here?" Eric pulled out a chair and handed it to Kapoor. "This girl doesn't have the self-awareness. I'm the only one who tidies up occasionally. You can't spoil her too much," Kapoor suggested with a smile. Eric shrugged and did not answer. He stuffed a tape into the recorder and pressed the play button. "Kapoor, let's listen to this first." Kapoor knew that Eric would not speak without thinking, so he listened to it with Eric. A fast-paced accompaniment sounded, and soon, an infectious singing voice was heard. It must have been love but it's over now. Lay a whisper on my pillow. Leave the winter on the ground. I wake up lonely. There's air of silence. A few minutes later, the song finished playing. Eric asked, "Kapoor, what do you think?" Kapoor told the truth. "I don't know much about this. This song is very infectious." The female singer's voice is also very explosive. "Eric, why are we listening to this? I plan to use this song as an interlude for Pretty Woman. But that's not the main point. Kapoor, have you thought about UTA's future?" Kapoor nodded. "Of course, we've thought about it. We've already signed Al Pacino. If Your Pretty Woman is successful, and with Julia Roberts, as long as we have two superstars supporting us, our agency will be able to gain a foothold in the industry. After all, UTA is still very small. We can't be too hasty in our progress." Eric said, "Haven't you thought about developing in other areas?" "You mean?" Kapoor glanced at the recorder. "Singer." Eric nodded. The actors in the film and television circles have basically been divided up by all the big and small management companies. If we want to expand in this area, we can only slowly poach and nurture them. However, the music industry is still an undeveloped territory. Even the giants like CAA don't pay much attention to this area. This is a good opportunity for us to open up a new path. The 90s was still the golden age of the music industry. When Eric was preparing for the interlude for Pretty Woman, he had to put in a lot of effort to find the famous song, I Must Have Been Love, in the movie. He found out that the singers, Roxette, had not yet left Sweden. In his previous life, Roxette had been active for more than 10 years. After debuting in North America, the group's first single swept the music charts in 24 countries. How could Eric let go of this kind of potential? Kapoor, the song we just heard was performed by Roxette, a popular group in Sweden. Not many people have heard a song like this that can reach the top of the Billboard charts. So this is an opportunity for us. Do you understand? Kapoor said, "Looks like I have to personally make a trip to Sweden." Of course, the sooner the better. Since I was able to find this song, the other record companies will soon notice it. After all, they are more professional in this area than I am. We don't have much time left. Eric, are you going to set up a record company? Eric shook his head. It's too early to set up a record company. My current focus is still on the movie. After getting the contract with Roxette, you'll have to figure out the specific operation model on your own. Kapoor nodded to show that he understood. The two discussed some more details before Kapoor got up and left. After sending Kapoor off, Michael Krause quickly came up to him. Eric, it's been so long. Haven't you finished writing Resident Evil yet? Haven't you always been a fast shooter? The last word happened to be overheard by a waitress. The girl subconsciously glanced at Eric's crotch. She wanted to laugh but didn't dare. Her face was slightly twisted as she carried the tray and hurriedly walked to the kitchen. Eric had a depressed look on his face. Michael, can't you be more careful with your words? If that girl accidentally revealed what you said, who knows what those tabloids will say about me? Michael Krauss insincerely apologized and continued to ask about Resident Evil. Okay, take it. Eric found the draft and handed it to Michael. The contract is the same as before. Once you're done, send it to me to sign the contract. Just as he said that, Drew suddenly popped out. When she saw Michael flipping through the draft, she yelled and pounced over. Hey, Eric, I'm not done reading yet. Michael stretched out his arm and used a few Tai Chi moves to cut a watermelon. He blocked the little girl's outstretched hand and stuffed the draft into his bag. He ignored Drew's yelling and said, Eric, I'll be leaving first. Goodbye. After that, Michael picked up his bag and walked away as if there was a little devil chasing after him. Okay, don't mess around. Eric knocked on Drew's head. I still haven't settled the score with you for skipping class. You even secretly deleted the phone message the principal left for me. Drew instantly lost his ferocious aura and turned back into a well-behaved little girl. He clasped his hands behind his back, but the craftiness in his eyes remained. I'm sorry, Eric. I won't dare to do it again. Eric's eyes were serious. Drew, did you touch those things again? Drew quickly shook her head. No, I really didn't. I just took a few classmates to the Rose Bowl to watch the game. Eric, I swore that I would never touch those things again. Eric let out a sigh of relief and said, No wonder your principal was so angry when he called me. You didn't learn well, and you even led the good girls in your school astray. Drew nodded and arched her head in Eric's arms. She raised her little face and said, Eric, my female classmates are very pretty. Do you want me to introduce them to you? Some images appeared in Eric's mind and he was instantly confused. That's too much. Hurry up and go to sleep. You're not allowed to go out before school starts. Chapter 63. In the 1980s, Hollywood had yet to conquer the world, and the Walk of Fame was not as famous as it was in the future. When night fell, the Walk of Fame was no different from any other street in Los Angeles. It was filled with shops, pedestrians, and scantily clad women. An inconspicuous car was parked by the side of the road. In the passenger seat, Eric looked at Julia Roberts, who was being hit on from time to time. Julia was wearing heavy makeup at this moment. Even those who knew her well would not be able to recognize her immediately. The woman leaned against the lamppost lazily and flirtatiously. Her eyes wandered as she looked around. Eric had designed this look based on Vivian's appearance in his memory. Not only did it bring out her pure and exquisite face, but it also brought out Julia's perfect figure. In less than half an hour, the number of men hitting on Julia had already exceeded the number of tasks that Eric had assigned. Just as Eric was thinking about whether he should continue, he saw 3 or 4 strangely dressed young men surrounding Julia. He quickly said to the muscular driver in the driver's seat, Tonis, start the car. We can do it now. Yes, boss. Tonis started the car and drove to Julia's side. Julia was forcing a smile and pretending to be polite with a few people. When she saw Eric's car driving over, she quickly slapped away a young man's strange hand that was reaching out to her. Hey, guys, my client is here to pick me up. I already said that I'm waiting for someone. He paid a huge price. The few young men looked at the inconspicuous car and laughed in disdain. They continued to pester her. Girl, how much can someone who drives such a lousy car pay? How about $200 a night? The other girls on this street only pay $70 a night. Tonis, who was almost 2 meters tall, opened the car door and appeared in front of them like a small mountain. He glared at the young men fiercely, and the young men were stunned. They knew that they could not even defeat one of his hands with their small arms and legs. They smiled apologetically and left with their tails between their legs. "Miss Julia, get in the car." Tonus put away his fierce expression and considerately opened the back door for Julia. Julia thanked him and got into the car. The female assistant in the back seat, Allison Green, hurriedly put a jacket on Julia. In this season of Los Angeles, the nights were still quite cold. "Eric, how was my performance?" Julia put on her coat and asked Eric impatiently. Eric praised, "I'm very satisfied. If I hadn't specially called Tonus over, there might have been some trouble today. Boss, this is what I should do." Tonus smiled honestly as he started the car. Tunney's was a security guard hired by Firefly Movies. This 2-meter-tall black man had a gentle temper, and he claimed that he had never fought with anyone before. Being a prostitute on the streets was actually a very dangerous profession. Some prostitutes were suddenly kidnapped into cars, and a few days later, their corpses appeared in the garbage dump. Just in case, Eric called Tonus over for the test that night. "Tonus, you live around here, right? Stop at the intersection ahead. You can go home. I'll send Miss Julia back." Tonus nodded, stopped the car, and bade farewell when they arrived. Julia's female assistant, Allison Green, also opened the car door and said, "Mr. Eric, there's a bus that goes to my house. I'll get off too. Goodbye." Soon, only Eric and Julia were left in the car. Eric started the car, and Julia curled up in the back seat anxiously. Both of them were silent. Half an hour later, the car stopped in front of Julia's apartment. The girl got out of the car with her head lowered. After waiting for a while, Eric didn't get out of the car with her. Instead, he stuck his head out of the car window and said, "Julia, rent a new place as soon as possible. It'd be best if it's in Beverly Hills. Once the filming starts, the media won't be able to hide the news that you're the main lead. The paparazzi will be very troublesome then. I'll ask Jeffrey to give you a portion of your salary in advance." "Okay, Eric. Aren't you coming in?" Julia asked softly, her eyes unfocused. Eric winked at the girl. "Not today. Although I've taken some measures, I'm not sure if I've gotten rid of the paparazzi." Julia didn't know if she was happy or disappointed. She mumbled and waved at Eric before she turned and walked into the apartment. Eric watched the girl walk into the apartment before he rolled up the car window and drove away. On the first day of the new year, Al Pacino flew from New York to Los Angeles and settled down in his villa in Beverly Hills. Soon after, he immersed himself in the preparation work for Charming Lady. As a result, Pretty Woman held its first meeting with the main cast. Everyone chatted for the entire morning and got to know each other better. Eric also took advantage of this opportunity to discuss and revise the script with the other main actors. After all, the male lead had been replaced by Al Pacino. AL's acting style was completely different from Richard Gere's, and Eric couldn't shoot exactly according to his memory of Richard Gere. Eric also took the opportunity to let Al and Julia try out a few scenes together. In order to cooperate with the somewhat immature Julia, Al Pacino took the initiative to restrain his acting skills. However, during the performance, Al Pacino still somewhat suppressed Julia. That was because Al Pacino was only 1.7 meters tall, while Julia was nearly 1.8 meters tall after she put on high heels. Eric's original plan was to let Julia change her high heels into flat shoes and let Al wear high heels if she was uncoordinated during the audition because of her height. But after the audition, Eric dismissed the idea, because Julia's only advantage was her height. If this advantage was removed, it would be difficult for Julia to showcase herself under Al Pacino's sharp edge. A Lamborghini and its parent company, Chrysler, had spent $1 million sponsoring Pretty Woman. Both Lamborghini and its parent company, Chrysler, attached great importance to this cooperation. On the training ground of a driving school in Los Angeles, 2 small container trucks were parked by the side. Under the guidance of the staff, 2 Lamborghini Ghosts were carefully unloaded. "Wow, what a cool sports car." Drew stood next to Eric and looked at the silver and purple Lamborghini with stars in her eyes. She couldn't help but want to go forward, but Eric reached out and stopped her. Eric, I want that purple one. It's so beautiful. Eric pinched Drew's little nose and smiled. It's not a doll. You can have it just because you want it. The Lamborghini staff member named Ian Brayster saw Drew's reaction and smiled proudly. Miss Drew, you have good taste. Purple represents nobility and mystery. Most women like to choose this color. But this is a concept car that we specially built. In order to cooperate with Mr. Williams' movie shooting, it's not for sale yet. As they chatted, the staff led Julia and Al into the two cars and began to carefully explain the key points of operation to them. Although Julia and Al both had driver's licenses, they had never driven a Lamborghini before, especially Julia, who had never even touched a sports car before. In Pretty Woman, the Lamborghini would appear in the first 20 minutes. During the filming, the two of them would have to personally drive the car for a long time. According to the introduction of the Lamborghini, there would be some innovations in the operation of the latest Ghost series. In order to ensure that there were no accidents during the shooting, Eric had to train Julia and Al for 3 days. Lamborghini was also happy to cooperate and specially sent a technical staff named Ian Brayster to cooperate with them. Chapter 64. Most men liked sports cars, and Eric was no exception. However, he only showed up once on the first day of Julia and Al's training. After that, he didn't show up again because he was busy. Halfway up Beverly Hills, in a temporarily rented villa, Eric and Jeffrey were directing the staff to set up the set. This would be the shooting location of Pretty Woman. Al Pacino was a standard method actor, and according to the rumors in his previous life, Julia was always too emotional, and had sparks with male actors when filming, so she should also be considered a method actor. Actors with this kind of acting style were used to integrating the character into themselves and then showing it. If the shooting sequence was messed up, it would definitely affect the performance. In order to perfectly show the changes in the personalities of the two protagonists in the movie, Eric decided to shoot in chronological order. In the original movie, the first scene was a scene where Edward attended a party at the private lawyer Philip Stocky's house. This scene introduced the identity and character of the male lead through Edward's conversations with several characters. Eric and Jeffrey discussed it and finally decided to shoot this scene first. At the same time, they could really hold a party as the opening party of Pretty Woman. They didn't even plan to hire extras. Most of the extras would be played by the crew and family members. There weren't many scenes in this scene, so Eric wasn't worried about any mistakes. Yesterday, I went to Century City again. Fox still has doubts about our movie being released during Valentine's Day. I talked to Carter Hang for an hour before she agreed to make sure that the movie wouldn't be delayed. She would launch a publicity campaign 2 weeks before Valentine's Day. Eric, 2 weeks definitely won't achieve the best publicity. United Artists invited Richard Gere to star in Mighty Dragons Killing Formation, and they only dared to bring it forward to the Easter holiday in March. Eric was writing notes on a folder with a pencil. When he heard Jeffrey's words, he thought about it and said, "Don't worry, Jeffrey. Now all the media in the United States is spontaneously promoting my movie. It can be said that there aren't many people in the United States who don't know about Pretty Woman. Moreover, there should be another bombshell when the time comes." Jeffrey asked curiously, "What?" Eric smiled confidently. "Do some calculations. Based on the current box office trend of The Kid in the Home, how much box office will it reach?" Jeffrey quickly calculated. At that time, The Kid would have been in theaters for about 12 weeks, and the box office would have reached $200 million US. Seeing Jeffrey's relaxed expression, Eric asked, "Do you understand?" Jeffrey nodded. By then, the box office of Home Alone is likely to exceed $200 million US. It has been 3 years since a movie in North America grossed more than $200 million US. Some time ago, there was an article in Variety magazine that was pessimistic about the North American market. Once Home Alone breaks $200 million, the media will definitely be enthusiastic again. So, as long as there is no problem with the quality of my movie, I don't have to worry about box office losses due to publicity. On the other hand, United Artists cautiously put Mighty Dragons Killing Formation a month after Pretty Woman, so they won't be able to borrow much from Pretty Woman. Eric didn't care too much about the mighty dragons killing formation that he had no impression of in his memory. Richard Gere missed the opportunity to make a comeback with Pretty Woman, so it would probably be difficult for him to rise again. After all, his acting wasn't that good. Before Eric transmigrated, he hadn't received an Oscar nomination. Oh yeah, Eric, when I went to Fox's headquarters yesterday, Calta mentioned the movie adaptation of Jurassic Park again. Also, Fox is very interested in the Resident Evil you just released, but I changed the topic. Due to Michael Krause's efforts, Resident Evil was successfully released a few days ago. Once the novel appeared, it caused some controversy. Most of the newspaper reviews of the novel were critical, and some even suspected that Resident Evil was created by Eric. After all, the style of the two novels was too different. Eric didn't respond to these doubts. Anyone with a normal brain would think that with his current fame and wealth, why would he need to find someone for a few royalties? However, after Resident Evil was released, Michael Krause called to say that the book sales were good, and that readers were very interested in this novel zombie sci-fi novel. Moreover, many readers had already written to Michael and Eric, hoping that Resident Evil could be adapted into a movie. Jeffrey, if someone contacts you about adapting the novel into a movie, just reject them. I definitely won't give up these two novels unless the other party can come up with a cooperation plan that satisfies me. Jeffrey nodded and suddenly remembered something. He smiled and said, "The Golden Globe Awards are really giving us face. Home Alone is actually nominated for Best Musical Comedy Film." Eric also smiled and said, "Whether it's the Golden Globe Awards or the Oscars, they will all bow to the box office. Just wait and see. Even if the Oscars committee doesn't want to, they will definitely pinch their noses and give Home Alone a few nominations." Jeffrey probed, "You're so tight with the filming schedule. I'm afraid we won't have time to attend the Golden Globe Awards banquet." "Don't worry," Eric packed up the folder and put the pencil in his ear and said, "The Golden Globe Awards are giving us face. Even if we stop filming, we will definitely attend. If we are all in Los Angeles and refuse to attend the banquet because of filming, we might unknowingly be hated by others." Thinking of the future where poor Xiao Li returned empty-handed after being nominated for so many Oscars, Eric would not make a mistake. Many people said that Leonardo did not win the Best Actor award because he was not good enough and always played himself in all the roles. It had nothing to do with Titanic not being nominated and refusing to attend the Oscars. However, since that opinion had spread to the public, it was definitely not groundless. The two chatted as they set up the filming location. At noon, they had lunch nearby. Eric looked at his watch and said to Jeffrey, "Jeffrey, you can arrange the things in the afternoon. I have something to do and need to leave." Jeffrey was very curious. What could make Eric put down the movie preparations at this time? Eric said helplessly, "This afternoon, Drew starts school. I have to send her to school. The girl got into trouble at school last time and the principal personally called me." Jeffrey was stunned for a while. He shook his head and laughed. "You really treat that girl like a daughter?" Eric shrugged. "I spent money and played tricks. The contract I signed with Edico is basically equivalent to getting Drew's custody. I don't care who takes care of her. I feel like I'm reaping what I sow. I saw in a newspaper that someone praised you. They said that you helped Drew break away from her greedy mother's control and sent her to boarding school. This is a kind of love for Drew." Eric did not intend to hide anything. He picked up the jacket on the back of the chair and put it on. He said casually, "I paid someone to write that draft. I have to let people know my good intentions, right? Otherwise, some people with ulterior motives will always try to make trouble for me with the fact that Drew is underage." Jeffrey, who was drinking coffee, could not help but spit out, "You are really—" The principal of Drew's girls' school was a Caucasian woman in her 50s. She had a kind and amiable face. Eric sat alone opposite the principal and listened to her nagging. "Mr. Williams, deep down, we don't want to give up on any child. It's just that Miss Barlimore is really too naughty. The girls in the school are all young ladies from rich families. They are very quiet and demure. If their families know that their daughters have learned how to skip classes, they will definitely question the education environment of our school. And we can't use force to stop Miss Barlamore. So, if this happens again, we can only ask Miss Barlamore to transfer schools. Ms. Gurion, I've already warned Drew harshly. That's good. Gurion nodded. She nagged for a long time before letting go of Eric. Walking out of the office, Eric looked at Drew, who had already changed into a beautiful school uniform, and said, "Okay, I have already been taught a lesson for you. You don't want to embarrass me a second time, right?" The girl smiled and held Eric's arm. "Don't worry, it won't happen again." "You don't have any sincerity in your answer." Eric pursed his lips, but there was nothing he could do. This girl was simply impervious to fire and water. Even if he held her down and gave her a beating, she would just close her eyes and enjoy it a little. Opening the car door, Eric sighed and looked around. Seeing that there was no one around, he said in a low voice, "Don't cause any more trouble. I will be very busy recently. Even if you want to skip classes, don't get caught." Hee. "I know you are the best to me, Eric." Drew quickly tiptoed and kissed Eric on the cheek. Eric smiled and rubbed Drew's head. He turned and got into the car. Waving his hand, he drove away under Drew's reluctant gaze. Chapter 65. On January 7th, in a villa in Beverly Hills, Pretty Woman officially started shooting. Based on the consideration of keeping the goodies within the family, many of the supporting roles in Pretty Woman were chosen from UTA. Kapoor was right. These people's acting skills were fine, they just lacked opportunities. Even if they could get a small role with only a few lines in the director's new film of Home Alone, these small actors would be quite satisfied. Eric didn't make any promises to them either. As long as Pretty Woman was released, the contracted actors of UTA would realize how lucky they were. In his previous life, because of the popularity of Pretty Woman, even the elevator operator who only appeared a few times in the movie eventually became a comedy actor who kept getting offers. Edward's mercenary private lawyer, Philip Stuckey, didn't have a suitable actor in UTA. Eric had someone contact the original actor, Jason Alexander. Jason Alexander was still an ordinary Broadway stage actor. Although his acting skills were good, his appearance didn't have any advantages. He only played some unimportant roles in a few movies and TV series. When he heard that he could get a very important supporting role in Eric's new film, he didn't hesitate to jump ship from his original agency to join UTA. Hollywood was so realistic. As long as Jason Alexander achieved success in the future, no one would accuse him of betrayal. Instead, they would envy his good luck. In the villa, all the actors were in position. Eric sat behind the monitor and made an okay gesture to his assistant. The shooting officially began. Pretty Woman, Act 1, Scene 1, Action. With a click, the scriptwriter hit the board, and everyone in front of the camera began to move. In the shot, a magician from the circus said his lines while skillfully changing the coin magic. No matter what they say, the topic can't be separated from money. Soon, the camera moved up and the magician pulled out a gold coin from the ear of Edward's ex-girlfriend. Philip Stuckey, played by Jason, appeared in the shot with a smile and asked a male guest who was watching the magic show about the whereabouts of the male lead, Edward. This was a long shot of nearly 1 minute. The acting was difficult and it was quite a test of the actor's ability to perform. In order to film this scene well, they had rehearsed many times. Jason Alexander did not disappoint Eric. As the camera moved, Jason smiled throughout the whole process and spoke his lines without any hindrance. He walked back and forth among the guests, accompanied by rich and natural body language. After Jason kissed the cheek of a female guest, Eric shouted with satisfaction, "Cut." Jason Alexander put down the champagne in his hand and walked towards Eric with a smile on his face. "Director Williams, how was that scene? Would you like to do it again?" Eric couldn't help but give a thumbs up as he praised, "No need at all. It's perfect. This is a good start." Several members of the crew couldn't help but come over. Eric replayed the scene just now. Everyone saw Jason Alexander's performance and nodded in unison. After watching the replay again and confirming that there was no need to shoot it again, Eric clapped his hands and said, "Okay, the relevant staff will prepare for the second scene immediately." Everyone dispersed, and Jason Alexander walked into the villa to prepare for the next scene with Al Pacino and the others. A room on the second floor of the villa had been converted into a conference room. Al Pacino was flipping through the information that he had read countless times. In order to make Al feel more immersed in the role, Eric had specially prepared more than 10 pages of information on Lewis Company and Moses Company. Although these two companies were fictional, the content of the information was designed by professionals based on the real companies. The second scene was a meeting to discuss the acquisition of Moses Company. Although the room had been preliminarily renovated, it still took half an hour to set up the cameras and other work. After the shooting began, Eric focused most of his attention on Al Pacino, who was performing for the first time. Al Pacino didn't have many lines in this scene. He relied on his expressions and body language to express himself, which was what Al Pacino was best at. Al's image was very different from that of Richard Gere in the original version. His portrayal of Edward was still elegant, but there was more wisdom and indifference in his temperament, and less gentleness and easygoing. In fact, this was more in line with the script setting of Edward as a cold businessman who carried out his own plans like a machine. Therefore, Eric quickly accepted the new image created by Al. Cut. After shooting a few scenes, Eric suddenly shouted for a pause just as a scene started. He frowned and stood up. "Eric, is there a problem?" Al Pacino asked in confusion. The first few scenes had gone smoothly, and he didn't feel that there was anything wrong with his performance just now. Eric shook his head. "Al, it's not your problem." After that, Eric sat behind a blonde girl at the conference table. The blonde girl named Dolly hurriedly stood up. Eric expressionlessly picked up the notebook on the table that Dolly had just scribbled on. "Dolly, do you know that because of your negligence, we have to reshoot all the scenes just now?" Dolly nervously apologized. "I'm sorry, director. May I know what the problem is?" "Your role is a meeting recorder, but in the first few scenes, you looked absent-minded. Did you know that? If this was a real company meeting, you would definitely be fired. Look at what you wrote. May I compare you to summer, but you are gentler than summer. Is this a poem?" The blonde girl's fair face blushed slightly as she explained softly, It's a sonnet by Shakespeare." "Okay, Miss Artistic Youth, now, sit down." Eric asked Dolly to sit down again and personally corrected her sitting posture. He placed the notebook in front of the girl and said, "Next, remember, don't write any more poems. Write down all the lines that Al and the rest of them say as soon as possible. Do you understand?" Dolly nodded. "Got it. Director Williams." Eric returned to the director's chair and directed everyone to start shooting again. The reason why he let the girl off so easily was that Eric was also at fault. He had focused too much attention on the performance of Al and the others and ignored Dolly's mistake. It wasn't until Dolly appeared in the center of the screen that he realized it. If he had corrected her in time at the beginning, so many scenes wouldn't have been wasted. However, as a director, in order to maintain his prestige in the crew, he certainly wouldn't admit that it was his mistake on such a trivial matter. Although the party scene in the villa was only a few minutes long in the movie, it took more than half a day to shoot. It wasn't until 4 in the afternoon that the last scene in the villa finally came, which was the conversation between Edward and his ex-girlfriend, Susan. After rudely and directly breaking up with his current girlfriend, Jessica, Edward, who was about to leave the villa, walked downstairs and bumped into his ex-girlfriend, so the two of them chatted briefly. "Susan, can I ask you something?" Edward stared at Susan. Susan was puzzled. "What?" Edward raised his hand and thought for a moment before he said, "When you were my girlfriend, did you talk to my secretary more than I did?" Susan sounded a little disappointed, as if she was recalling the past when they were together. "Your secretary later became my bridesmaid." Stunned for a moment, Edward smiled awkwardly and said goodbye to Susan. This scene seemed ordinary, but it was actually one of the several turning points for the male lead, Edward, in the movie. There was a reason why Pretty Woman was able to achieve box office success and was included in most romance movie lists. Many people would think that it was just a fairy tale about a prince and Cinderella that couldn't happen in reality. That wasn't wrong, but the plot design of this movie was much more exquisite. Perhaps the director himself had only done this subconsciously, but he couldn't deny the existence of these exquisite settings. If one were to talk about illogical, then Notting Hill, which was filmed after Julia became famous in her previous life, was illogical. The male and female leads only met once and didn't say much before they kissed passionately in the male lead's apartment. Eric saw this movie for the first time, and he was shocked by that abrupt scene. And in Pretty Woman, the reason why the male and female protagonists were able to get together in the end wasn't because of unreasonable force. In the movie, Vivian and Edward's personalities had undergone at least 3 transformations. Vivian's first transformation was not long after the movie started, when she met the prostitute who had died in the trash can. In the close-up of that moment, Vivian's eyes showed fear. So, when she met her good friend Kate Luca, Vivian asked for the first time, "Don't you want to get rid of this life?" The second time was to accompany Edward to a banquet. Vivian went to buy clothes alone and was chased out of the clothing store. Walking on the street with her coat tightly wrapped around her, Vivian felt a piercing sense of humiliation, which made her determined to escape her original life once again. The last time, Edward gave up on buying Moses' company, and the furious Philip Stocky blamed it on Vivian. In the hotel room, Philip Stocky said to Vivian in a harsh tone, "Don't forget your identity, Miss Vivian. You're not a little woman, you're just a prostitute." This sentence completely woke Vivian, who was immersed in the Cinderella dream that Edward had created. So, when Edward said that he wanted to keep her as his mistress, Vivian ran to the balcony and didn't dare to look Edward in the eyes. Instead, she told him about her childhood fantasy. She said to him that he could either give her a fairy tale, or let her leave. In the end, she chose to leave, although that wasn't the end. The change in Edward's personality began in the villa, when he had a conversation with his ex-girlfriend, Susan. He asked his question, and Susan said that her secretary had become her bridesmaid in the end. It could be imagined how cold and indifferent Edward had been to Susan, so she had no choice but to rely on his secretary. Although this detail couldn't cause much change in Edward's personality, it made him start to reflect on his behavior. Edward's second transformation was after having dinner with the boss of Moses' company. When he returned to the hotel, he sat alone on the balcony and looked at the night view of Los Angeles. Because the conversation during the meal reminded him of his father who had passed away not long ago. He had studied hard, worked hard, and finally took revenge on his father for abandoning his mother. The first thing he did after setting up the company was to buy the company that his father was in charge of, break it up, and sell it. However, his father had passed away, and 14 years of resentment had disappeared. He finally felt a trace of exhaustion. When a person was tired, their willpower was always the weakest. At this time, a woman suddenly appeared in front of him, enlightened him, comforted him, and unknowingly broke into his heart. On the piano in the restaurant, the tired Edward burst out with strong emotions for the first time. The final transformation began that night. Vivian pestered Edward to play chess. Edward rested his chin on his hand and said, "Why don't we play tomorrow? I still have to work." Vivian asked, "Why do you have to work? Take a day off." Edward woke up from a dream. "Yes, I'm the boss." Thus, Edward was completely depraved. They went shopping like a couple, hugged each other on the lawn, read, and chatted about everything in the snack bar. In the end, he found that he couldn't leave Vivian. On the sad rainy day before they parted, Edward finally made up his mind to give Vivian a fairy tale. He turned into a knight, holding a sword, umbrella, in his right hand and flowers in his left hand, and climbed up the castle window, hanging ladder, to welcome his princess back. Chapter 66. After the scene where Al Pacino pretended to drive the Lamborghini away from the party ended, the day's filming schedule was completed. The crew's working time was also close to 8 hours. As long as they maintained this progress, Eric believed that the film could be completed within 4 weeks. Therefore, although he still had plenty of energy, he did not ask the crew to work overtime. In Europe and America, working overtime was a very serious issue. It was basically impossible to ask Europeans to work overtime. Some countries even imposed high overtime taxes to restrict companies from letting employees work overtime. If you asked Americans to work overtime, not only did you have to give them a satisfactory compensation and rest plan, but you also had to deal with the possible questioning and investigation from the union. The set of the villa was originally a party. According to Eric's original idea, after the filming was completed, the real kick-off party began here. Amidst the melodious and soothing music, Eric rejected the bold flirtations of several beautiful women. He sat on the sofa in the corner and chatted with Jeffrey about the next filming plan. Occasionally, he glanced at the dance floor from the corner of his eye, and his gaze paused slightly on Julia and Al Pacino, who were hugging each other. Julia had already quit her job as a waitress at Jeff's restaurant and received an advance payment. Now, she had rented an apartment in Beverly Hills and moved in according to Eric's instructions. Although she did not have any scenes today, Julia still took the initiative to appear on set and help out from time to time. She also took the time to rehearse a few lines with Al Pacino. Eric was quite satisfied with Julia's attitude. Except for a female assistant assigned to Julia by the agency, Julia did not receive any preferential treatment in the crew. In fact, even Al Pacino did not receive any special treatment. When he entered the set, he still drove his own car. After work, he also went back to his home to rest. In order to save money, the crew only rented a trailer for the actors to do makeup and change. Of course, this situation would only happen once. Eric believed that when the two of them filmed their next movie, they would definitely not receive such simple treatment. Jeffrey, who was chatting with Eric, quickly followed Eric's gaze and found the focus of his gaze. "What's wrong, Eric? Are you jealous?" Jeffrey leaned over slightly with a teasing tone. He knew exactly what had happened between Eric and Julia. Eric shook his head calmly, but after all, he had been intimate with Julia before. When he saw Julia and Alfred flirting on the dance floor, it was impossible for him not to feel a little jealous. However, Eric had no intention of keeping Julia for himself. Big-mouthed beauties weren't his cup of tea. As a senior member of the Appearance Association, Eric didn't consider Julia a beauty in his heart. "I'm just observing how Julia and Al get along." Eric casually found an excuse. Now it seems that after a week of practice, they've already gotten into character. "Look, don't the two of them have a sense of harmony?" When Jeffrey heard Eric's words, he also looked over. On the dance floor, Julia and Al Pacino whispered a few words from time to time. They looked at each other affectionately. "It's true, Eric. Do you think Julia will fall in love with Al after filming this movie?" "It's very likely," Eric replied, thinking of Julia's affectionate and sensitive personality, "but I'll definitely won't accept Julia. His girlfriend is pregnant." Al Pacino was also a playboy, and his methods were quite brilliant. In his previous life, he skillfully flirted with many women, and several women gave birth to his children. If it were before, Al might have started a relationship with Julia. But this kind of thing was unlikely to happen now. Al Pacino was at a critical moment in his comeback, and his girlfriend's pregnancy was not a secret. If he were to be in a relationship with Julia at this time, abandoning his pregnant girlfriend would be a huge blow to his image. If Eric was the only one looking at her inadvertently, Julia might not have noticed. Now, Eric and Jeffrey were both looking over at him, their mouths full of comments. If Julia didn't notice it, she would be pretending. Al Pacino also noticed Eric and Jeffrey's gazes and smiled at them graciously. Julia, who was in Al's arms, was inexplicably nervous. Once her state of mind was destroyed, it was difficult to continue. After whispering a few words to Al, Julia left the dance floor and walked towards Eric. On the dance floor, Al Pacino shrugged nonchalantly and soon found another beautiful girl to dance with. "Julia, why aren't you dancing?" Eric asked curiously when Julia sat down next to him. "I'm just a little tired." Julia took a glass of champagne and sat down on the sofa. She leaned towards Eric as if nothing had happened and asked, "What were you talking about just now?" Jeffrey smiled and answered first, I just made a bet with Eric. After this movie is finished, will you fall in love with Al? How can you do this? Julia's tone was angry, but disappointment flashed in her eyes. Eric quickly interrupted Jeffrey's nonsense and said, Julia, don't listen to Jeffrey's nonsense. We're not that bored. It's just that when we saw you and Al dancing, we felt that the following filming would go smoothly. Both of you are obviously in character. Julia nodded, took a sip of champagne, and asked, Eric, are you going to dance? Eric lifted his sleeve to look at his watch and refused. No, I'm leaving soon. Why don't you stay a little longer? It's absolutely impossible to be so relaxed for the next period of time. Jeffrey urged him to stay. Eric stood up and said with a smile, Today is the first day of Jenny's TV series. She specially called me from New York and asked me not to forget to watch it. It's almost time. When Jeffrey heard Eric say this reason, he couldn't help but tease him a little, but he also stood up. Some other sharp-eyed people noticed that Eric might be leaving and also came over. At the entrance of the villa, Eric said to Jeffrey and the others who sent him off, You guys go back. Jeffrey, don't let them play too late. Be careful not to delay tomorrow's filming. Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on them. Eric waved his hand and walked towards the parking lot. Julia hesitated in the crowd and followed. Julia, what's the matter? Eric had just opened the car door when he saw Julia walking over. Eric, I haven't had time to buy a car yet. Can you give me a ride? Eric smiled and said, Of course, no problem. As the car drove smoothly on the road, Eric casually found a topic to talk about. Julia, how do you feel about Al? Julia lowered her head slightly and glanced at Eric. She thought for a moment and said, Mr. Al Pacino is very gentlemanly and talkative. He makes people involuntarily have a good impression of him. However, I don't have much romantic feelings for him. Mr. Pacino is more than 20 years older than me. Eric said with a smile, Al will be sad to hear your evaluation. You don't like older men, but Al likes young and beautiful girls. Do you think I'm beautiful? Eric nodded without hesitation. In the eyes of Westerners, you're a standard beauty. Although Julia felt that Eric's words were a little strange, she still looked a little happy. After a short pause, Julia mustered up her courage and asked, Eric, is your current girlfriend Jennifer Aniston? Yes, we met when we were filming Back to 17, Eric said. He then remembered something and smiled. Jenny knows you too. That's impossible. I've only seen her in the newspaper, and that time. Julia was a little embarrassed at the mention of the absurdity of that night. Eric didn't take it to heart. She also met you then. Speaking of which, the image of Jennifer Aniston throwing a tantrum surfaced in his mind. Eric smiled. Jenny also wore that shirt. By the way, do you still have it? Can you return it to me later? No problem. Julia nodded subconsciously. The car stopped in front of Julia's newly rented apartment. The girl got out of the car and looked at the empty streets on both sides. She asked expectantly, Eric, do you want to come in and have a cup of coffee first? There are no paparazzi around this time. Eric leaned out of the car window and refused. Forget it, I have to go back quickly. I'll just wait here. Okay then. Julia took out the key and opened the door. She looked back and saw that Eric still had no intention of getting out of the car. She had no choice but to enter the house alone. In the bedroom, Julia opened the closet and took out the clean white shirt. She subconsciously put it in front of her and sniffed it. Then, she folded it in her arms and walked to the bedroom door. Recalling what Eric had just said, the girl's footsteps became more and more hesitant. She could no longer suppress the jealousy in her heart. She turned around and put the shirt back into the closet. Then, she guiltily found 2 of her own clothes to cover it. She took a few deep breaths and walked out of the room. Eric, I'm sorry, I forgot where I put the shirt. I'll return it to you when I find it, okay? Eric stared at the girl for 2 seconds and sighed. Okay, forget it if you can't find it. Just as she was about to roll up the car window and leave, Eric thought for a moment and stuck his head out. "Julia, I can guarantee that after Pretty Woman is released, you will become a Hollywood superstar who will be the center of attention. At that time, countless men will treat you as their dream lover and there will be countless outstanding men pursuing you. So..." Eric hesitated for a moment and didn't say it too bluntly. "Act well, don't let me down." Julia bit her lips and blinked a few times. She forced a smile and said, "Don't worry, Director Williams, I'll do my best." Then, "See you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow." The girl raised her hand and waved. She watched as Eric started the car and disappeared at the end of the street. Looking at Julia's figure in the rearview mirror, Eric sighed softly. His index finger gently tapped on the steering wheel and a few Chinese phrases came out of his mouth. He had forgotten the melody. Wandering the world, unable to hide his elegance. Not for infatuation, only for the flowers. The flowers are too fragrant, the wind blows under the flowers die, the flowers are impermanent. Walking magnanimously, without a little. Eric stopped at the last word and shook his head with a self-deprecating smile. How is that possible? Chapter 67. After the veiled rejection that day, Julia seemed to have put her feelings for Eric to the back of her mind and began to devote herself to the filming. Whether in front of others or in private, Julia called Eric Director Williams. Of course, Eric didn't have time to feel disappointed by the girl's alienation. As the accumulated scenes increased, the post-production editing work of the film began at the same time. Eric worked with the editor almost every day until late at night. Sometimes, because it was too late to finish the work, Eric slept in the office to save time. Jeffrey was also worried about Eric's work style. Most films were edited after the filming was completed. Although Eric's last film, Home Alone, had a very short production period, it was also the standard process. But now, Eric had messed up the order. However, after watching the footage edited by Eric, Jeffrey was completely relieved. He just told Eric to take care of his body and not to be too tired. It wasn't that Jeffrey hadn't asked Eric why he was working so hard. With Eric's current achievements, he would be able to enjoy the profits of Home Alone for the next 10 years. Eric just smiled and didn't explain. He continued to work. How could Jeffrey know the ambition in his heart? When he first walked into Fox's audition room, the sprout that had sprouted in his heart was now deeply rooted in his heart, and the series of successes that followed made this sprout grow stronger and stronger. Eric just wanted to see how far he could go. After 3 days of practice, the filming progress of Pretty Woman suddenly sped up. At the same time, they officially entered the Beverly Hills Wilshire Hotel and began some of the most important scenes. Cut. Eric poked his head out from behind the monitor. It was the scene of Vivian and Edward having breakfast together. "You change Julia's lip gloss a little, not too light." It was just a small change, and Julia didn't need to hide from everyone's eyes. The makeup artist stepped forward and adjusted Julia's lip color. After a while, the makeup artist turned around and asked Eric, "Director, is this okay?" Eric glanced at Julia and shook his head. "It's too light. Make it a little thicker." The makeup artist fiddled with it for a while before Eric nodded in satisfaction. At the same time, he said to his assistant, Alan Fissman, beside him, "Alan, note this down and remind me in the future." Eric thought for a while and said, Julia's lip color gradually changed from bright red to pink, and from pink to light red as time went on. After the scene where she was almost raped by Philip Starkey, Julia stopped wearing lip gloss and kept her original color. Although Alan Fissman had doubts in his heart, he still quickly wrote down Eric's words on the memo. Eric did not explain anything to the audience. This was an inconspicuous change that he had made to the movie. He just wanted to use this method to slowly hint at the transformation of the female lead, Vivian. As for Vivian's good friend, Kate Luca, her lips were that kind of vulgar bright red from beginning to end. At noon, Jeffrey rushed to the set. "Eric, I talked to Calta Hunter all morning, and Fox still didn't agree to your plan to release the trailer during the Super Bowl live broadcast." Eric put down his lunchbox, wiped his hands with a napkin, and asked, "What did they say?" A 60-second trailer during the Super Bowl costs about $1.2 million. Fox thinks it's a waste. They think that 2 weeks of intensive publicity before the release is enough for your movie, Jeffrey replied. In the end, they still don't have enough confidence in your new movie. Everyone knows the reason why they signed a 3-movie distribution contract with you. It's just for the second part of Home Alone. Eric squeezed the napkin in his hand, thought for a while, and said, "Continue to talk to Fox. Get them to pay as much as possible. The important thing is to get the 60-second spot from NBC. If Fox is unwilling to pay in the end, I'll pay for it personally. Eric, our movie's budget is only $7 million. If you must release the trailer during the Super Bowl, I think 30 seconds is enough." Eric patiently explained, "Jeffrey, if it's a special effects blockbuster like Star Wars, 30 seconds is indeed enough. You just need to cut a few shocking scenes. But Pretty Woman is a drama. I also plan to add our company's logo. That way, 30 seconds won't be enough to express anything." "Okay, if you insist." Jeffrey did not say much. It seemed that he had never been able to persuade Eric to change his mind. However, many times, Eric was right. This time, he could only choose to believe in Eric. In this era, the marketing of Hollywood movies was still relatively conservative. The large-scale release of movie trailers on the Super Bowl was more than a decade later, and only the Big Six could afford to play. The Super Bowl is known as the Spring Festival Gala in the United States. Since its birth, it has always been the most watched event in North America. The number of viewers is generally more than 100 million. The Super Bowl is broadcast live by several major TV stations in the United States. This year, it happened to be NBC's turn. Eric also saw the Super Bowl trailer on NBC TV a few days ago when he was watching Jennifer Aniston's TV series. At the same time, he had the idea of playing the trailer of Pretty Woman at the Super Bowl. In the years before his rebirth, the concept of the Super Bowl trailer had been deeply rooted in people's hearts. Almost every year, the Big Six Hollywood studios would send the trailer of their lead movie to the Super Bowl live broadcast. But in this era, Eric's idea was a bit avant-garde. Under normal circumstances, the current Hollywood blockbuster movies would only broadcast the trailer on TV about a month in advance. Although a month after the Super Bowl is also a good Easter slot, the blockbuster movies of this era obviously won't choose this slot, but squeeze it in the summer or Christmas slot. Therefore, no movie company will broadcast advertisements at the Super Bowl. The advertising fee of the Super Bowl is still quite expensive. Eric consulted before. This year's Super Bowl advertising fee has reached a high price of $670,000 for 30 seconds. $670,000 doesn't seem to be much, but it can be broadcast in the prime time of mainstream TV stations such as NBC for half a month. On the Super Bowl, it can only buy a flash of 30 seconds. Even so, Eric quickly decided to put a 60-second trailer of Pretty Woman on the Super Bowl. This was the second movie he directed, and the box office results were very important to him. Although Eric has always been confident that Pretty Woman can achieve good box office results, deep in his heart, concerns about the butterfly effect still exist. Therefore, he will not let go of this excellent publicity opportunity. According to his information, if things go well, Pretty Woman will be the first movie trailer to appear on the Super Bowl. More than 100 million viewers, plus the gimmick of the first Super Bowl trailer, can bring a topic to Pretty Woman. In contrast, the price of $1.2 million is completely acceptable. Moreover, Eric believes that after this topic is hyped up by the media, it will be more than enough to last until the release of the movie 20 days later. After deciding on this matter, Eric thought of another thing. "Jeffrey, how is our company's opening logo?" After setting up Firefly Films, Eric and Jeffrey discussed it and came up with several opening logo ideas, and finally chose a 3D version of the idea. After Pretty Woman started shooting, Eric handed over the matter to Jeffrey. "I've urged Pixar several times, and they said that it will definitely be done this week. It will definitely not delay the trailer. You can rest assured." Eric was just about to nod when he suddenly opened his mouth. "You mean? Pixar? Jeffrey didn't understand why Eric was suddenly so surprised. Yeah, what's the problem? Is it Jobs Pixar? Jeffrey nodded. Yes, it's Jobs Pixar, said Jeffrey with a gloating smile. Speaking of which, Jobs has been really unlucky in recent years. First, he was kicked out of Apple. He ambitiously bought Pixar with the intention of making a dedicated graphic design computer. Unfortunately, after the product was launched, the sales were average. Now he can only take on some animated advertisements to keep the company running. However, Pixar's animation technology is really excellent. I saw their short film, Small Table Lamp, and decided to give them the logo. Chapter 68. Eric quickly sorted out the trivial memories of Pixar from his previous life. As the leader of Hollywood's 3D animation, Pixar produced the world-famous Toy Story animated film series. But before 1995, Disney's 2D animated films still dominated the animation film market, and no one was optimistic about the future of 3D animation. Jobs himself had no faith in 3D animation. Until the release of Toy Story, he had been trying to sell Pixar, even contacting his old rival Microsoft. When he contacted Microsoft executives, Jobs deliberately placed a laptop running Windows on Pixar's desk to please Microsoft's senior vice president, Jonathan Melward. Unfortunately, Microsoft's price did not satisfy Jobs. Jobs, who was in deep trouble, had to grit his teeth and persevere. Finally, he saw the light. After the release of Toy Story, it broke the box office record of $192 million in North America alone. The global box office was close to $360 million, and the cost of Toy Story was only $30 million. After that, the market value of Pixar, which was worth $50 million, increased by 20 times. When Disney acquired Pixar in 2006, its market value had reached $7.4 billion. Looking at the time, Jobs should have started to sell Pixar, which was a loss. Eric had just thought of buying Pixar immediately, but he had to shake his head in disappointment. Although Jobs could not insist on a price of $50 million like in his previous life, even with a 50% discount, Eric could not afford $25 million. He did not have much money now. Since Home Alone had been in theaters for so long, Columbia must have started to split the profits with the theaters. However, if Eric wanted to get his share, the best situation would be to wait until Home Alone ended. In his previous life, it was not uncommon for film directors and actors to go to court with the film company that owed them money in order to get their share. Even if it was just deposited in the bank, the daily interest of hundreds of millions of dollars was a very large number. Even if there was a clear agreement, the Colombian side would certainly try to drag it out as long as possible. Eric could even imagine what kind of dirty trick Columbia would use to delay the payment. For example, a few months later, when the box office potential of Home Alone had clearly been exhausted, in order to delay the payment date, Columbia would insist on using more than 100 screens to prevent the movie from being released. Eric might just be able to watch helplessly. Because of the VAM, the possibility of Columbia working with Eric again in the short term was very small. Columbia did not need to consider the relationship between the two sides. It would not be a problem for them to use these tricks, especially when Blunt Cohen was sitting in the CEO's seat at Columbia. After thinking about it, Eric still felt that the most important thing now was to make Pretty Woman a good movie. Anyway, even if history did not change, there were still 6 years before Toy Story was released. Eric had enough time to take over Pixar. Before the shooting of Pretty Woman, the preparation work was quite complete. The crew did not need Jeffrey to be present at all times. Several executive producers were enough to arrange everything. Jeffrey and Eric discussed for an hour before leaving the crew in a hurry. They were ready to fly to New York to discuss advertising with NBC. The Super Bowl advertising bidding started half a year ago. NBC had successfully sold 80% of the advertising slots this year. Jeffrey was fighting for one of the remaining 20%. The time slots would not be good. Even if the time slots were much higher than the average price, they would have been snatched up long ago. 3 days later, Eric just woke up when he received a call from Jeffrey. He said that he had won a 59-second ad. The Super Bowl ads were calculated by seconds. The shortest was 15 seconds and the longest was 90 seconds. In the bathroom, Eric put the cordless phone under his neck and squeezed toothpaste on his toothbrush. He asked, "What, won? $5 million US? Didn't you say that we could get it for $2 million US?" Jeffrey's tone was also helpless. "If no one bid, we could have gotten it for $2 million US. During the bidding, a New York fashion company suddenly appeared to compete for this ad. You told me to get it, so I had no choice but to raise the price to $5 million US. I even suspect that the fashion company was hired by NBC. But this is just my guess. I don't have any evidence." With an extra $300,000 US spent, Eric was not in the mood to slowly brush his teeth. He messed around, rinsed his mouth, and returned to the living room. "Forget it, $5 million US it is." Eric sat on the sofa and poured himself a cup of water. "Sign the contract as soon as possible. By the way, Jeffrey, tomorrow is the Golden Globe Awards ceremony. Can you make it back in time?" "I'll see how it goes. I might not be able to make it back." Jeffrey's tone was regretful. "Anyway, everyone wants to see you, Director Miracle. It doesn't matter if I go or not." "Haha, don't worry. It doesn't matter if you miss this opportunity. There will be plenty of opportunities in the future." "I believe that too." Jeffrey also laughed. "If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up. You must have just woken up. It should only be 7 in the morning in Los Angeles. But I have to inform you as soon as possible about the $300,000 US overspend." "It's okay. I didn't stay up late last night. I came back around 10. After saying goodbye, Eric hung up. Leaning on the sofa and gently tapping his knees, Eric silently calculated a small bill for himself. The $25 million US check he received from Fox, $9 million for the mansion in Beverly Hills, $1 million for Drew's mother, $1 million for the acquisition of UTA, $3 million for the rental and renovation of Firefly, as well as the expensive professional equipment in the dubbing room and editing room. The production cost of Pretty Woman was $7 million US, $5 million for the Super Bowl advertisement, and a total of $4 million US. Although he was not a luxurious person, during this period of time, he had spent a few $100,000 US. Since he was reborn in America, Eric immediately faced one of the two things that no one in this country could escape from: paying taxes. With his current income, he definitely had to pay the highest 35% personal income tax, which was close to $10 million US. After viciously cursing the evil capitalist system, Eric sadly discovered that he probably would not have any income before the tax filing deadline, April 15th. "I don't need a loan to pay taxes, right?" Eric rubbed his forehead with a wry smile. After all, he was not a real American and did not form a deep-rooted concept of advanced consumption, so he was very resistant to loans. For the time being, Eric put this matter in the back of his mind. After breakfast, he drove to the set. Perhaps because Eric announced that the weekly fixed day off would be moved forward to tomorrow, the crew members were in high spirits. In one day, they even shot 5 or 6 more scenes. After 10 days of shooting, 60% of the scenes for Pretty Woman had been completed. At this rate, after the Golden Globe Awards ceremony, it would only take a week for the movie to officially wrap up. The reason why the shooting was so smooth was mainly due to Julia's excellent performance. From the beginning, Eric was not worried that Al Pacino would have any problems. Al, who was nominated for so many Oscars, had no pressure to perform a role that did not require much acting skills and even required some restraint. But as a newcomer, Julia was different. In the beginning, Julia did not have many problems shooting solo scenes. At most, she had a few NGs. But in the beginning, when she was acting opposite Al Pacino, Julia frequently made mistakes and the number of NGs skyrocketed. Compared to Al, Julia's acting skills were indeed at an early stage. However, after a few days of practice and Eric's uncontrollable roars, Julia gradually closed the gap with Al Pacino. In some scenes, He was even able to suppress Al to a certain extent. Even if Al Pacino had restrained himself, it was still a very difficult thing to do. Okay, that's it for today. After the last scene, Eric announced that they were done. The crew members cheered and began to pack up and go their separate ways. Eric stopped Al Pacino, who was about to remove his makeup, and asked, "Al, how's your piano solo going?" In the original movie, Edward's piano solo in the restaurant was composed and performed by Richard Gere himself. Eric wrote the score of less than 40 seconds based on his memory with the company's score musician and handed it to Al Pacino. Al's piano skills were only slightly better than Eric's, but he insisted on playing it himself. Eric had to postpone the scene. "Eric, give me another. No, 2 days. I think I need to practice more." "That's not a problem." Eric admired Al's professionalism. "But, Al, we can't drag it out for too long. The filming progress is so fast. If we drag it out for too long, as the plot develops, your mood will change greatly. By then, no matter how good you play, it will be difficult to perform the feeling you had after shooting those scenes a few days ago." Al Pacino thought for a moment and understood that Eric was telling the truth. After realizing that his insistence could not improve the quality of the movie by much, Al nodded helplessly and compromised. "Okay, Eric, let's put this scene on the day after tomorrow. If it really doesn't work, we'll use post-production dubbing." You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.